Hi, everybody. It is 6:11 on November 4th. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. I'm Mike Capuano. I am the chair of the Planning Board. With me tonight is Amelia Aboff, Rob Buchanan, Jahan Habib, Erin Gino, and Debbie Howard Easton. We have a full contingent of the Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Somerville Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. An audio recording of these proceedings will be available upon request to planning@somervillema.gov. This meeting is being recorded. We have a number of items on the agenda tonight. First one is 73 Summer Street, which has previously been opened. And the applicant has made a request to continue this case until the November 18th meeting of the Planning Board. The chair moves to continue the discussion of 73 Summer Street to the 18th, seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Right, that agenda item is continued with a unanimous vote. We also have a presentation on 872 Broadway, which is previously opened. We'll have discussion on 371 Highland Avenue and 315 Broadway. We'll have approval of certain meeting minutes and a number of other items for other business, which is the Assembly Square Neighborhood Plan Update presentation and recommendation to the Land Use Committee of the two remaining proposed amendments that have been the subject of discussion for a number of weeks. I believe neither 371 Highland Avenue or 315 Broadway have been opened yet for a hearing. I'm going to ask the clerk of the planning board to read into the record the notice of public hearing for 371 Highland Ave and 315 Broadway, please.
Yes, notice of public hearing, 371 Highland Ave, P&Z 21-041. J&C Realty Trust proposes to develop a 4-story LEED Gold general building and establish a household living principal use for 23 dwelling units in the mid-rise MR4 zoning district. This proposal required site plan approval and 1 special permit. Public hearing 315 Broadway, P&Z 21-096. Pilates X LLC seeks to establish a fitness services use and a healthcare services use on a pedestrian street, which requires 2 special permits.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I believe that you're muted.
I am. I was giving Rob the courtesy of not hearing me. It's the discretion of the chair to take agenda items out of order, and I am going to exercise that discretion. First and foremost, I'm going to take up the approval of minutes because that won't take very long. We have 3 minutes that we need to approve. One is April 1st, 2021. Does anybody have any discussion on the proposed minutes for April 1st, 2021? No. Seeing none, the chair moves to approve the meeting minutes for April 1st, seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
We have a unanimous vote and we have meeting minutes. April 15th, 2021. Does anybody have any questions or discussion on April 15th proposed minutes? Chair moves to adopt the April 15th proposed minutes, seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
We have a unanimous vote for meeting minutes for the 15th. April 29th, 2021. Does anybody have any discussion on April 29th? Chair moves to adopt the April 29th, 2021 meeting minutes, seconded by Amelia. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
And we have unanimous meeting minutes for the 29th. I would like to invite Dan Botman to be unmuted so we can have a discussion on the last two proposed amendments that were the subject of a joint hearing with the Planning Board and Land Use Committee a few weeks ago, and which was also the subject of discussion by the Planning Board in its last meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Hi, Dan. Dan, could you remind us which two amendments are left? It's, as I recall, it's the rooftop mechanicals and the rezoning of certain properties on McGrath Highway, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Let's take McGrath Highway first, because I believe that there are a number of people here who want to make a presentation and further discussion on this. So who is the most appropriate person to have unmuted to speak on McGrath Highway, Dan?
There is one, Kim Shamaman, and then also the property owner of 35 McGrath is here, I believe. We would probably need a hand raise from the crowd.
Okay. So who would like to speak on, and this isn't open testimony, this is, we received some additional information on this item. So I see Ken McClure. Please raise your hand if you are here on McGrath Highway rezoning.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I am going to make Kim Schmaman. Kim, I very much apologize for if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm going to make Kim Schmaman a presenter because she is, I believe, the representative for the applicant bringing forward this request, and then afterwards we will unmute Ken McClure, who I believe is part of the team for the properties in consideration.
Thank you. And for anybody that's going to speak, if you could please introduce yourself for the record. Name and address, or name and affiliation of entity.
Hi, Kim. This is Rebecca speaking. Can you confirm that you're ready to go and you can hear us?
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you. Yes, but I'm not that familiar with GoToWebinar, and it just shot up something saying that I need to share screen. Is this something you did to me, or?
Yes, I made you a presenter so that you can share your documents now.
Okay. All right. Okay, I hope this works. It's going to make me get out and come back in. I'm sorry.
We'll be waiting for you when you're back.
Okay.
And let me also take this moment to apologize for misgendering Mr. Schmaman. Okay. I'm being told that he's back now. Apparently an evening for difficulty Kim, you are unmuted. You may be muted on your side. Mr. Chair, we're having some technical issues, so we apologize. Kim, why don't you come back, leave and come back to be able to speak? And I believe that I have your most recent document. I will use my own computer to show it for you.
Would it be appropriate to, if Kim is unable to get through at this time, to hear from the other individual who wanted to speak?
Certainly I can do that, Mr. Chair. Mr. McClure, apologies, this is Rebecca speaking. Mr. McClure, you are self-muted.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? This is Ken McClure speaking on behalf of the ownership.
Hi, we can hear you.
How you doing? Pleasure to meet you guys. So I'm the developer and owner's representative for this project. Myself, Ken McClure of the D'Annunzio Group. My boss, Dustin D'Annunzio, work with the owners who are Charlie Laverty and Paul Lonis, who own 35 McGrath Realty Trust. We've owned this property now for these 14, 15 years. So we've been cheering the city of Somerville on in this process through the zoning overhaul and everything. And we're just getting ready to start our preparations for our developments, and we're excited for everything and all the hard work that Somerville's done to date. We are represented by Joe Hanley and Tom Miller of Miller Quilty McDermott Partners, and I also have our architects here from Stantec who have a presentation. Not sure if we want to get into that or whatnot, but anyway, so what we're trying to do is we have, I'll bring it back to the beginning. We started out with the folks next door at Save More Liquors and at 15 McGrath Highway. Originally, we planned to do a combined project together where where what you will now see as two buildings was originally supposed to be one building. 15 McGrath, as you know, has been approved or is seeking approval for their project, and essentially we're just matching the same height as they are, as is allowed through the new Somerville zoning. So we wanted to be partners with the folks over at Brick Bottom, and as Kim will tell you, we've already met with them before we've submitted for really anything. I believe we do have a submission. I believe we have a submission for a pre-file, but we wanted to meet with them because once again, it's important to us to make sure that what the folks over at Brick Bottom are looking at is something that they're happy with, something that fits within the city's zoning ordinance as they've seen fit. And so I probably won't go ahead and share my graphics until after Kim has a chance to share his, because I want him to have, the floor and be able to share what his folks are petitioning, and then we can respond to that. But just wanted to introduce myself, my team, and I think that we have a really great project planned, something that's really going to fit within what the city kind of thought was appropriate for this area when they completed the zoning overhaul. So hopefully Kim has a chance to get back on, and then, like I said, if necessary, we'll respond after he has a chance to go.
Thank you. Is Kim available to speak now?
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca. Kim is back in the meeting. Raisa, why don't you upgrade him to a panelist? And I will load his presentation sent at 4 p.m.
Okay. Right.
All right, Mr. Schwammen, we can hear you.
Finally, my apologies to everybody. Okay, thank you very much. Anyway, it was good to hear from 35 McGrath, and hi to, I think it's Andy. Yes, we have spoken. Can you see my slides? Is there a way for me to show you the slides?
We don't see, I think Rebecca was going to share your slides.
Okay. Rebecca, are you showing them?
Not yet. Please just give me one moment.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair, if I may. It's just come to my attention that I actually may have a conflict for which I should recuse myself on this matter. If it won't be problematic, may I recuse myself now and rejoin the meeting after this item?
Yeah, that's
Out of an abundance of caution, because I'm just not sure, and I apologize for that late notice.
No, that's okay. Remind us if you have been present, because I think the answer is yes, for discussion on this agenda item in the past.
I was present for the joint hearing on when this was presented with the Land Use Committee.
Okay.
And I may not need to recuse myself, but I just realized I'm unsure of a possible relationship.
Okay. What I would do if I were you is once you kick off for this presentation, just connect with David Shapiro and make sure that everything that is appropriate for you to do, since you just realized that you may have a conflict, is preserved and protects you retroactively from now to that joint hearing a few weeks ago.
Will do. My apologies, and I'll be back on this. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Kim, I have the slides that were sent at roughly 4 p.m. You can tell me which ones you want me to click through to.
Okay, let's go to page 2, sorry. The first drawing, this one, that's correct. I just quickly, if I'm moving my cursor, unfortunately, you can't see what I'm doing. But basically, the red triangle is the brick bottom building complex. And what we have, as you all know, is on our side, we have the raised infrastructure for the GLX. And then on our northeast side, we have the raised community path as well as the raised infrastructure for the GLX trams. And this is where our sort of story begins. And basically, on the south side, the GLX realized that their raised structure was causing shadow problems for us. So they've agreed to put in 8-foot tall acrylic panels to allow some sunlight to come through during the winter months. Now we can move over to the next slide, which is basically, I'm just taking through the required shadow studies. But if we go to the next slide, please, Rebecca, down to the next page, sorry, thank you. What happened is that 15 McGrath Highway developers came in with their plans and showed us their shadow studies. And what we realized at that early stage was that the shadows just from 15 McGrath being in an HR district with the height permitted, plus with the exorbitant mechanical space they put in on top of the building, they were casting shadows across our property during the winter months, which was negating the effect of the acrylic. So we were basically getting no sunlight into the south portion of our site. When we took this up with 15 McGrath, basically they said to us that they're not the problem because the properties to the west of them would actually create more of a problem for shadows on top of us. And it was at this period that we started to look at the total picture of what it would be like if all the sites were developed to the current zoning. And so if we go through to the next page, this is March 24th, let's go to 4. And you see that in the summer, June 21, there's not a problem. Everything works very well. Now let's go to the next one. And we start, next page, right? And here we start in September, and we see that we're starting to get shadows moving across the south portion of our property. Now, if we can go to the next slide, November 5th. Now, this is not a standard time period for doing a shadow study, but what we were looking at here is when does the shadow become so bad that it starts to cross a lot of the open space that we have, as well as climb up the walls of the elevations that face south on our building. And as you can see, it also overrides whatever sort of opportunities we got by having the acrylic in the wall. So if you go to the next page, page 7, this is December 21st, and you can see how dense the shadows are over December 21st, thrown by all of the buildings if developed to the full capacity. Let's go to the next one, page 8. Now we can see that we have still got very similar to what we were on page 6, where we have a 12-week or 3-month period where we basically will be in shadow constantly during the day in the south portion of our lot. So one can argue that shadows move across the properties and thus are not static obstructions. But what I'm trying to show is how constant the coverage is, because when the shadows from the buildings would actually give us light during the day, we now have the infrastructure which is throwing us in shadow. So it's the combination basically that is causing the problem, not one single building on its own. It's the entire lot. During the creation of the new zoning ordinance, we at Brick Bottom were invited to provide input, but this was all focused on the Brick Bottom area and excluded the sites along McGrath Highway. We were all looking west when we should have been looking south. We did not realize until quite late, basically till 15 McGrath walked in the door, that we had not been asked for our input on the McGrath sites, which we now realize will have a major impact on us. So that's why we're requesting a remapping of these sites. Given how vital light and sun are to the health and well-being of our community, we hope that these concerns are addressed. And if we can go to the next page, please. Right, so here, what I did was another shadow study showing that if 15 McGrath actually redesigned their building to accommodate how their buildings currently designed throws the shadows, but they actually moved and angled some of their walls. So that I said, okay, the base of the building can go up to 70 feet. When they go above that, if they angle the wall, they can actually miss our building by casting the shadow in a slightly different direction. And then 35 McGrath would only go up to the 70 foot. If they went to MR5, would go up to the 70 foot, along with 51. their shadows would become more acceptable. And then the 2 units that are currently in the MR5 district, if we drop them down to the MR4, which, you know, one would normally say you go down 1 story, it's not going to make much of a difference. But because of how the relationship of these buildings to the raised infrastructure along the boundary between us, and when we can get light past that infrastructure, it actually does make a difference. So I'm glad that the sort of developers are here, especially from 35. You know, I think this is something that we as a community need to sit down, discuss, and look at, and try and come up with a method. I'm an architect. I like seeing new buildings. I don't want to stop any buildings, but I also don't want to see the brick bottom building complex being destroyed by what I feel was a sort of problematic zoning by allowing HR sort of south of our border. So thank you, and thank you very much for allowing us in on the meeting and for listening to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We did have Mr. McClure who wanted to make a presentation as well after Mr. Schmaman. So I would ask for Mr. McClure to be unmuted and to make any presentation that he would like.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Kim, for your great presentation. As we've discussed, you know, I sat down with, well, I had a Zoom meeting with some of the folks over at the Brick Bottom and heard them out, and, you know, we understand their concerns. And, you know, while height is a difficult thing, obviously, to work down because it directly affects density and it directly affects our ability to develop, you know, we do definitely want to work with them to make sure that we are developing something that they're happy to see. You know, I know that Kim and a number of other people over there are architects, and, you know, last thing we want to do is put up some eyesore, you know, in the backyard. So, so we've heard them loud and clear. You know, we'd like to work with them to figure out some form of, you know, to have them have some say and potentially art pieces that come on the side of the building. But I wanted to just pull up one slide or a couple of slides that I have prepared that I just wanted to share with the group. So just give me 1 second. I'm pulling it up. Okay. And then do I have the ability to share a screen?
Rebecca or Rice, does Ken have the ability to share his screen?
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I believe that Rice is in the middle of upgrading Mr. McClure to a presenter.
Great.
Everyone
Okay.
cross your fingers.
Fingers are crossed. I have that. All right, show my screen. And I'm just going to take a second here. I'm pulling up an email. I want to see if it's in my things here. Of course it's not. All right, give me 1 second. I just need to find the document that I just had it up, and just going to give myself a second here to find it. Where did it disappear to? Dave. You know, it's always when you need to find something that it's harder to find. I just had it up. I apologize for the delay, everyone. Nope. Oh my goodness. Where on earth did this go? Okay, I'm gonna try this a different way. Okay, here it is. All right, I'm gonna show my screen again and pull this up. So, you know, we basically have been looking at this and suggesting that, you know, we look at what was actually created through the zoning here, because, you know, this was thought about for a really long time. And we actually went through this, and this was designated as high rise. And they actually did take this into consideration, exactly the conversation we're having right now, about a step down effect. And I just want to make sure that, you know, this is something that the city considered, and you'll see that within the zoning, you know, you're actually going to see that this is high rise here, which then will then connect into Cambridge Crossing, which is on the other side of the tracks shown here with this high rise zone. And then this over here, the red district is where you're going to see the commercial plaza in here. And so, you know, I think that they actually did a really good job responding to Kim's thoughts here, where they do have a step down here where there's a mid-rise 5, which actually takes into consideration where their buildings are located in the fabrication district here.
Mr. Chair, I do apologize for interrupting. It appears that your screen is not advancing, Mr. McClure.
Oh, it's not being shown?
We can see the zoning map, the zoning atlas for the city of Somerville main page, but that's all we can see.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what so you're seeing number 19, the zoning map?
No, we're seeing the main page. We're not seeing 19 yet.
Oh, interesting. Let me know if you see this. I'm sorry. You see it
There we
now?
go. Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that wasn't sharing. So, so what I was showing is just kind of highlighting the areas that were shown. So 15 McGrath right here is shown as this piece right here, is this parcel. And then we are actually this parcel right here. Next to us is the Life Storage building at 51 McGrath. And then directly across from the Brick Bottom Artist Lofts, the planners that pulled this thing together really noted that, and they brought this down to an MR5 district to actually match the height of what the Brick Bottom Artist Lofts have. So I feel like the city actually did a really great job, because they noted that what they have coming in over here is actually Cambridge Crossing, which actually has even higher buildings than we have in our district. And so, you know, we're talking about buildings that are about 155 feet above average grade. And over here, they can reach up to almost 300 feet within that district between Cambridge and Somerville. So, you know, there is certainly a step down, as Kim referred to it. You know, so we just wanted to make sure that was noted, that, you know, the city did think about it. It wasn't that they were forgotten. And unfortunately, maybe they didn't bring that specific idea of shadows to the table, but they certainly did think about this and the step down effect and the way that it would affect kind of the city as a whole. And as I said, you know, we understand that we are an impact, and that's why we want to work hand in hand with them. We've reached out already, and we will continue to reach out to try to find things that work with them. And so yeah, so that's really where I wanted to go with it. I don't know if anybody from our team, Dave or Tom Miller, want to say anything differently. But yeah, that's what I have so far.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I'm noticing that Dave Kaddish has his hand raised. So Raisa, could you please unmute Dave Kaddish? Mr. Kaddish, you are self-muted.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just have one request, and that was a great presentation by Kim. And if he could provide at a later date after this meeting, what time period in December, what time of day rather, were those shadow studies taken, just so we could just understand better where that information is coming from.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but may I just answer that one
Yeah, there's
question?
not usually a back and forth, but I think
Yeah,
in.
I didn't think so.
It might
I
make sense.
apologize.
Right.
That makes
They
sense.
conform to the Somerville City requirements. That will answer your question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The shadow study time periods conformed to the City of Somerville shadow study requirements.
Thank you.
I see a Jennifer McGrory with her hand raised. I'm not sure who Ms. McGrory is affiliated with. Are they with? Is she with someone's team? Because this is not.
Yes, yes, sorry. Jennifer is with the Brick Bottom. She's a trustee from Brick Bottom.
Okay. Does she have an additional presentation? Because this is not open testimony.
I think she may have further presentation to further what I was talking on. Thank you.
Okay, Rebecca and Risa, are we familiar with what Jennifer McGrory is expected to present?
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I do not have an advanced presentation from Ms. McGrory.
Okay. Could we unmute her? Because I'd like to ask her what it is that she intends to present, because this is not open testimony.
Mr. Capuano, this is Jennifer. I do not have additional presentation material. I am an architect, and I wanted to add one point to Kim's presentation that we had spoken about in advance, and I don't think was mentioned. And that is that it's just that the heights of the buildings as modeled are for the heights of the buildings, and these buildings are proposed. I'm also an architect. These buildings are proposed to be lab office buildings. And so the mechanical equipment on the height of the buildings is an additional piece that is an impact on the Brick Bottom building as well. And I know that that's a further discussion for the evening tonight about mechanical penthouse heights.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any presentation style comment, because it's no longer testimony, but comment that they would like to make before I open it up to discussion by the planning board and of Dan? Scrolling and I don't see anybody. Okay, thank you for the three folks that that spoke this evening.
Mr. Chair, I apologize for the interruption. Thomas Miller has raised his hand, and I know that he is a representative of one of the developer teams.
Okay, I just saw that. Can we unmute Thomas Miller, please?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yep. I just want to reiterate quickly one point that that Ken made when he was discussing this. When the city overtook the overhaul in 2019, I know that this team was heavily involved in talking with the city to make the best use of the land in this area as its gateway into the city of Somerville from Cambridge and Boston. As it appropriately steps down from the larger buildings into this area, this level of building height was considered and was, this high-rise district was designed and placed in a way to best make use of this high transit thoroughfare and this appropriate location for this type of use of the land. And it just, this allows not just the developers of 15 and 35 and 1 McGrath to get the best use out of the land, but it allows the city to present and create a welcoming environment and gateway into the city of Somerville. This attempt to, kind of rezone after the fact is understandable that, Brick Bottom has their concerns and Ken has, and we have worked with them and are continuing to work with them during, after our initial pre-file meeting with the city in the beginning of this process. And this, well, at this point, I don't want to keep taking the time to reiterate other comments that were made, but I just wanted to make that brief statement. But thank you for your time, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. Okay. Dan, are you unmuted still, or at least available to be unmuted?
I'm here.
Okay. Before I would like to discuss with my colleagues, I'm wondering if the staff and the administration have a position on the proposed amendment to downzone from HR to MR5, these several properties.
While I start, if Rebecca could. I'm sorry, I missed that.
I was just clarifying what the proposed amendments were.
Sure, Mr. Chair. If Rebecca could put up the shadow study while I'm starting, I do want to reiterate that the solicitor's opinion is that this could be susceptible to being overturned in court. We of course can't predict that outcome, but he believes that there may be vulnerability there, and I again don't know how that will unfold. One thing that we want to draw attention to is the different shadows cast by different buildings in these diagrams. Rebecca, if you could advance, I think to more like the fall. I provided them with the submittal requirements for a shadow study that we would require of all high-rise development, and they did an amazing job at following those directions. As a group of residents, I really want to commend them for the graphic that they made and put together. Here's September 21st, and one of the things I want to draw attention to is that I believe the building beside 51 McGrath to the right is in the 80s, like 85 McGrath or something like that. You can see the 9 a.m. shadow in the lightest gray, reaching almost the edge of that first property there. And I want to call attention to how that shadow moves across over time. So in the September months, we start at 9 a.m. and go until the afternoon. And in the winter months, we start at 9 a.m. and only go till 3. So we don't illustrate shadows when the sun is typically so low it's practically dark out. But you can see how each one of these gray tones is showing you 1 hour at a time, and where they overlap is where there'd be cumulative shadow over the day in the same spot. But in my opinion, this specific image right here is showing shadow cast on, for instance, the bakery at 9 a.m. From 51 McGrath. And certainly there are additional shadows cast from the 2 potential buildings that could be built in what is now a parking lot at the, I believe, 85 McGrath. Rebecca, could you go to the next slide? Here you can see that same 9 a.m. shadow, similarly casting shadow on the bakery. And one of the things that the residents have called out is that the MBTA has gone to the extent to build, there's a 35-foot tall sound wall between their building and the Green Line extension tracks. That's equivalent of a 3-story building. However, it's designed in a material that is acrylic and not like a wall of concrete. So it's designed to try and improve the lighting condition rather than generate its own shadow. And there is the potential of some of these buildings casting a shadow upon that 35-foot tall acrylic wall, defeating the purpose of it being acrylic in the first place. And so we recognize that that would potentially detrimentally impact a feature of the Green Line extension that was designed to mitigate the impact of the Green Line extension. And we remind everyone that we are a financial contributor to the Green Line extensions project. So we partially paid for this sound wall as a city. Rebecca, if you'll go to the next slide in December. This is probably the most significant version where you can see the shadows impacting is high winter. So each one of these hours is even more important for the day because there's way less daylight hours over the course of the day. So you can see here that the bakery itself, the exterior wall facing south, is affected for at least throughout the 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock hours. So we do recognize that there is some impact from 51 McGrath Highway at the height of that building as illustrated. I believe that their diagram said that there was no known rooftop mechanicals in the illustration. So if there was rooftop mechanicals, those shadows from 51 specifically would be taller. Mechanicals are illustrated in the two buildings, 35 McGrath and 15 McGrath. And the buildings on the 85 parcel are illustrated at MR5. So by our read, the most impact is coming from, specifically in this diagram, the two 85 parcels or the two potential buildings, the furthest to the left or the west. Even if those were built only at 5 stories, you can see how those shadows are cast over the course of the winter. Or in high winter, and over the course of the day, the courtyard between the two buildings has significant shadow, regardless of time of day, and the bakery southern face wall would be shadowed by 85 McGrath significantly over the course of the day, regardless of 51 McGrath having a shadow impact for 2 hours of that same morning. So the first place where we would potentially argue for a different zoning district would be for these two sites to the furthest west, and that 5 stories may still cast an undesirable shadow. We have, a question being raised about 51 McGrath and whether or not that should be a different district because of its shadow impact that is for less of the day, but it is still a shadow impact, and we don't find the same level of impact cast by 35 McGrath or 15 McGrath if they are both, if you consider all of these potential buildings in their future condition. 15 McGrath definitely cast shadow on the Brick Bottom Artist Lofts if it was a standalone isolated building, but we know that these other buildings are coming through the pipeline. So if we were asked to reconsider this, the first two properties that we would look at is the two to the west that I believe are in the 80s. And then we would have a question about 51 McGrath potentially being not in high rise because of its 2-hour shadow impact on that side. And this is, if you go one more slide, you'll turn the year into February, I believe. Yep. And so you can see where those shadows start to pull back away. This would be a similar shadow condition as you would have in November. So the December depiction is definitely the worst condition. If all of these buildings were built to their maximum heights plus rooftop mechanicals, our belief is that the two properties to the west would have the most impact and might be deserving of a zoning change. And there's potentially that same argument for 51 McGrath, but we do not share that opinion for 35 or 15.
And thank you very, very much for that. That's exceptionally helpful for the way I look at this. And I want to thank you for also reminding us that the law department has provided an opinion that this could be a subject of a lawsuit that is vulnerable for challenge. And I want to remind my colleagues that traditionally when the law department has provided that opinion on a potential map change, it has been the practice of this board to make no recommendation to the land use committee to avoid us getting into a potential situation where we would advocate for something that is potentially rife for a challenge. So I would like to ask my colleagues to make any comments that they have, and see where we would like to go with this particular amendment. Again, it is, the opinion of me as one member, that we should be following the usual practice of this board by making no recommendation on a map change that is vulnerable to a challenge as opined by our council. Aaron, yes.
Find my unmute button from all of the windows. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to basically concur with that opinion, where we have precedent where if the city solicitor has recommended or opined that this is, vulnerable to a spot zoning challenge, that we make a no recommendation to the land use committee so that they might, do with what they will. And maybe just a comment notwithstanding that, my opinion, that the no recommendation, which is thank you for the shadow studies. They were, incredibly good and very useful. I do have, again, notwithstanding the no recommendation, sort of questions around, the impacts of the shadow and would it be detrimental to, the FAB use of the Brick Bottom Association in terms of, the business use of that property. And I'm just reminded that there's a reserved section in the Somerville zoning for the Brick Bottom district in the master plan development, section 8, which is reserved for a future neighborhood plan, which based on the Somerville, Summer Vision 2040, we strongly support artisan use and keeping our, Somerville funk around, for lack of a better term. So again, notwithstanding my concurrence with, no recommendation, I just want to, sort of applaud the shadow studies and, I see Dan's argument and the city's argument here for especially the western sections. Maybe not so much 15, but certainly these ones right on that western point.
Thank you, Aaron. What I think we might consider doing in this case, I welcome your collective thoughts here, is making a no recommendation, but providing thoughts like what you just mentioned in our no recommendation for things for the land use committee to consider. Although we're not making a recommendation on how we think they ought to vote on this proposed change, I think it could be appropriate for us to give them some ideas to consider as they review it. So, some notes on kind of what we've discussed. So I think that would be appropriate to include in the no recommendation narrative. So, does anybody else have any comments on?
Yeah, I just want to concur with the sentiment of a no recommendation to be consistent with how we've handled these in the past. At this time, I'm going to refrain from commenting on the substance of kind of what's been presented for that reason. If I were to want to dive deeper into this, I mean, I think I guess I would want to understand a little bit more about, I was kind of looking at the Google Maps and sort of like really getting a sense of what's there now, where the right of way is, where the open space is on the brick bottom lot, and to really get a better understanding of where the potential shadows would be touching down. I think that would be helpful to any future consideration of this issue, but for now I concur with the no recommendation.
Anyone else? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to my colleagues, I also concur with the no recommendation. I do think that the shadow studying studies have been very much very helpful, and in conjunction with Mr. Bartman's thoughts, not only relating to the solicitor's opinion, but also in general providing us with a better context has been very helpful, and I just want to commend Mr. Bartman for that.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, I think it is the will of the board, and the chair will move to make no recommendation to the land use committee on this agenda item for the reasons previously stated by myself and my colleagues, seconded by Rob. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Okay, we'll make no recommendation on that agenda item. Can we please invite Amelia back for agenda item 212308, requesting approval of amendments to the zoning ordinance for rooftop mechanicals. I know this is something that she has provided comment on in previous meetings, so obviously we want to make sure that she's back for this.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca. I have reached out to Vice Chair Aboff, and she is rejoining now.
Mr. Chair, may I make one comment related to the last item and where things go now?
Sure.
With all zoning amendments, there's a required recommendation from the planning board, but also the item is actually also addressed by the land use committee. So that would be the next step of this. It would go back to the land use committee. So there will be another meeting night for any parties here tonight that are interested in carrying on that conversation at that date. And we will make sure to let everybody know when the chair of the land use committee schedules that meeting.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, Amelia, can you hear us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, for the record, I've rejoined the meeting.
Okay, thank you. We now have Amelia Aboff back in the meeting. We would like to take up now agenda item 212308, which is a continuation on the discussion for the request of an approval for amendments to the zoning ordinance for rooftop mechanicals. And we have an opinion by the city solicitor's office, which responded to a comment provided by attorney Jennifer Schultz on October 15th. And either I can read the letter in for the record, or I can ask Dan to do that.
Mr. Chair, I don't have the letter in front of me if you would like to read.
I'll read it. This is a letter from the law department to the city council land use committee and the planning board regarding public comment letter provided by attorney Schultz dated 10/15/2021. The law department signed by attorney David Shapiro writes, you have asked whether I agree with the conclusions rendered in the public comment letter provided by attorney Jennifer Schultz on October 15th, 2021. If the only practical way for a, quote, research and development or laboratory, end quote, use to occupy a building is to include a rooftop mechanical system exceeding the threshold for a special permit, such that the ordinance effectively subjects all as of right uses to a special permit, then I agree with the statement. On the other hand, if there's a practical way to build any research and development or laboratory use as of right without including a rooftop mechanical system exceeding the threshold for a special permit, then I disagree with the statement. Whether it is practical to do so is a technical and industrial question. In my opinion, the property owners claim that it is not practical to build their specific building proposal without a rooftop mechanical system exceeding the by right threshold is not a viable legal argument. For such claim to have merit, in my opinion, all as of right research and development or laboratory uses would have to be rendered impractical due to the rooftop mechanical regulation. Please notify me if you have any additional questions. Signed by Assistant City Solicitor Attorney David Shapiro. So with that having been read into the record, I would like to open up discussion on this agenda item by members of the board, and also to ask Dan if he would like to speak on behalf of the administration as it relates to this particular agenda item.
Mr. Chair, I can elaborate on the legal opinion, and also I can provide an update about ongoing development of the amendment with the Land Use Committee Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure. So there is a legal doctrine that is called the SCIT doctrine in Massachusetts zoning, SCIT. And effectively, if you're going to permit something by right, you can't then regulate a characteristic of it by special permit. It's like a double jeopardy type of situation. And so you have to avoid that in how you craft the combination of regulations that you might provide for that type of use. So that's what Attorney Shapiro is highlighting, that if for some reason or in some manner we made it impossible to actually have a research and development use occupy space without that that larger size mechanical penthouse, and we essentially regulated that away but said that use is allowed by right, that would be a problem. But the fact of our zoning ordinance is that the use categories are just that, categories. We went from a use list of, I believe it was in the 390 line item uses down to 92. And you can only achieve that if you start grouping things that are similar in nature and similar impact into use categories. So there's actually a broad range of uses possible in our research and development and laboratory use category. For example, many of the small startup businesses in Greentown Labs would be considered research and development uses. Some of them would be considered laboratory uses. None of them are currently using an intense mechanical penthouse. So those types of uses are classified as that use category and could occupy a building with a lower mechanical penthouse. That being said, we do have some feedback specifically about rooftop mechanicals and their typical heights, which I'll transition into. We've seen some diagrams and some photos in presentation previously of the actual equipment that people use on the roof, chillers and boilers and air-cooled heat pumps and all those things. And generally speaking, we find that they're typically between 12 and 15 feet on average, the machine itself, the machinery. And if you have a machine that needs to be enclosed within an environmentally controlled penthouse, meaning kept out of the elements, we don't want snow or rain getting into some of these devices. That means the ceiling or the structure around that piece of machinery is going to end up being 15 or 20 feet in height if the machinery itself is 12 or 15 feet. So we find that the more intense lab buildings are probably more realistically regulated at 10 and 15 feet in height. So where the zoning might anticipate a lab building coming into existence and that the intent of that zoning district is to produce commercial buildings primarily, is an area, is the parts of the zoning where we would suggest 15 and 20 feet for rooftop mechanicals. Now, in looking into this, we believe that that's primarily the high-rise district and the commercial core district. We do know that the lab building was included in MR6, but the mid-rise districts and all of their standards are typically better suited to producing mixed-use general buildings. And that the commercial core district and the high-rise district have more favorable dimensional standards for commercial buildings and for lab buildings and for block buildings, which are the assembly square scale of development, and the entire block all at once. So you can see how we really have two districts that are more intended for those larger buildings, taller buildings, more intense use, and then a series of mid-rise districts that are really inside our squares. They're in more sensitive areas. They're along our main streets where smaller scale development is happening. And that's why they're nuanced 3, 4, 5, 6. And so where we feel like this is going is that there would be a smaller, shorter mechanical penthouse permitted in the MR districts than what would be permitted in the high rise or commercial core district. And so our opinion would be that apartment and general buildings would be maintained at 10 feet for every single mid-rise district, MR3, MR4, MR5, and MR6. And that commercial buildings could be 15 feet, which is the lower end of the 15 to 20 foot range. And that would be just the MR district. But for if you remember, the proposal in the HR district doesn't have a height limit. It has design standards because it wants the mechanicals integrated into that high-rise building because they're very tall in most circumstances. And then the commercial core district, we believe that it would be more appropriate to permit that 20-foot mechanical penthouse, but not when you're abutting the neighborhood residence or the urban residence district, which is where kind of the original conversation came from about this, is when we're very close to our residential areas, should we regulate the rooftop mechanicals? And previously we didn't regulate their height at all. So the original instigation for this question was proximity to neighborhood residents. And that is why we think that the commercial core district, when it happens to be mapped in close proximity or abutting a neighborhood residence or an urban residence, you would bring that mechanical penthouse down. But in the other circumstances where it's effectively surrounded by the same district, the commercial core district, that you wouldn't have that same local impact potentially on the residence district, right? Because it's surrounded by other commercial core properties, and that would be more appropriate for it to be 20 feet. So if I were to summarize this, it would be the apartment building and the general building in every single MR district at 10 feet. The commercial building in those same districts at 15 feet. In the commercial core district, it would be 20 feet unless it's abutting NR and UR, which it would drop down to 15 feet. And that would be our recommendation for adjusting the heights permitted in this amendment based on the public feedback that we've gotten and the actual dimensions of many of these pieces of mechanical equipment for commercial buildings, for lab buildings, when they're located within the community in places where we always anticipated that lab buildings would come into existence. And these smaller heights permitted would, if a lab building presented itself, would still rein it in and make it more neighborhood contextual. So that's the basis of where we're kind of floating with the height of the mechanicals. I have talked about the recommendations from the board that were brought up last time with the land use committee chair, and at least he himself supports the other items that were mentioned, that not just solar photovoltaic devices, but also solar water heaters as well, and wind generators should be exempt from the height limits because we're trying to be a more sustainable city, which was brought up by Vice Chair Aboff. And then some of the other concerns about interstitial floors. And he's, again, individually backing the inclusion of those items, those recommendations into a new version of this, which we have not drafted yet. Wanted to come and talk to you all first. But I have been meeting with them, the land use committee, independently. The one item that is kind of a remaining question is if we should allow a building to voluntarily build itself underneath its total building height limit, including its mechanicals. And, you know, we understand the interest in asking that question. Let's say a 4-story building that only builds itself as 3 stories and then a really tall mechanical penthouse. But it comes in under the permitted height for a 4-story building in total. Should that be considered acceptable? The reason we're kind of like wavering on this question is the rentable floor space and the impact it has on our economy and the tax base of the city is one of the things that we find ourselves defending. And so when we raised this question, it was, would we rather have that floor as a commercial building or one less floor as a lab building and potentially rooftop mechanicals in the place of that other leasable space? And that's a hard question to answer because both of those would be commercial buildings providing different types of jobs at different amounts, and either one of them would be desirable. And I'm not sure what either one of them outweighs the other. The one other item that was brought up related to that is there some, for lack of a better term, mutant building that could come into existence that underbuilds its actual floors and then has this mechanical penthouse that none of us were anticipating, like the 40 or 45 foot tall one that we have seen some of the other buildings contemplate. And we don't really have an answer to that too. We don't know how, we assume that is not highly feasible or realistic. But not being able to predict whether or not somebody might propose that has left us, you know, not answering this specific item and this specific suggestion, while all the other ones made perfect sense, even when we dug into them and tried to figure out if there was any issues surrounding the other recommendations. So I don't know if the board has any comments about that specific one, but generally there was support from the land use committee from your prior recommendations, and I think that the interest now is trying to nail down those height numbers. I guess the last thing I'll add is that we did not receive any public feedback about the findings or the concerns that your board should have when somebody requests the special permit to go over the height limit. And so we're left with the 3 that we were already concerned with: noise, exhaust, and I'm blanking on the last one, shadows, which should be more apparent than after the previous conversation. But there were already consideration language elsewhere in the zoning ordinance that we're able to tap into. There were other uses where these special permit considerations were already in the ordinance. So we just went and copied that text. So it would be keeping in line with what we are concerned about in other situations when it comes to noise or shadows or exhaust. So we were able to reappropriate other language from other concerns into the language that we might use for this special permit.
And thank you very much for the update and the overview. I always find what you have to say informative and helpful. I would like to invite my colleagues to comment on the amendment, the proposed amendment generally, but also kind of specifically on some of the updates and suggestions that Dan just raised to us, because I think there's a lot in there that is valuable and something that we can incorporate within a recommendation. So I know Amelia had spoken on this amendment in the past, and I don't know if you have any further thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with us.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Dan, for that update. I'm encouraged to hear that many of the suggestions or recommendations that we had discussed last time were well received by the Land Use Committee Chair. I think some of them are fairly straightforward, and I'm glad we've identified those. I think it will be a better document amendment for it. I do have, I guess, one remaining question or concern, which is just that I think it's important to make sure as we proceed with this that we are not creating a condition that requires the development community to get very far down a path and still inherently has too much risk built into it, because I think that that's not the type of, when we talk about sort of our economic development goals, if you can't define what the height of mechanicals will be until later in a process, but there may be a special permit requirement at the end of that that you don't know going into a project, I think it creates a kind of tricky situation that I would imagine wouldn't be well received. And so I think it's important that we either think about like what the timing of the special permit would be, what is the earliest that an applicant would need to be coming in with this concern, almost whether it's some, and what the criteria are on which that decision would be based, which as Dan laid out, sort of we didn't receive feedback on, but I can imagine it being a difficult permitting environment if that were to be terribly discretionary, but also something that one wouldn't know was needed until 3/4 of the way through a design. And I think it's a reasonable amendment overall, so I don't want to sound as though I feel otherwise, but I do still have a question about sort of how in effect this would work for someone seeking to develop a project that required systems that would exceed those baseline thresholds and thus need a permit.
Amelia, thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on this? Aaron, yes.
Okay, just quickly seconding everything Vice Chair Aboff had to say. And I think what I'm most encouraged by with Mr. Bartman, your comments after talking to the Land Use Chair is the contextualization of where it really is more focused on the impacts as it's adjacent to a neighborhood residential or urban residential. So it basically gives more freedom, excuse me, to develop taller mechanical systems in these transform districts where you're in the middle of larger buildings, but kind of makes maybe a sensible cap in the when you're bordering a conserved preserved district. So that's basically my thoughts on that. And oh, actually one other question on, or one other thought on the sort of total height problem, where if you have a 3-story building that's a lab and a 4-story building that's an office, and the sort of question of the economics of that rentable space, I wonder if that isn't actually just handled by the development team naturally, where if they have a certain plot of land, in theory, you would want to maximize your rent potential. And if you can maximize your rent potential at 3 stories with a larger mechanical or 4 stories with a smaller one, like I wonder if that maybe just isn't as much of a concern as we might be concerned about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I share kind of the practical concerns about that. Is I would imagine that a builder wouldn't make their project less profitable by trying to add a weird mechanical cap to it that would still fall within the height requirement. I think you're right that they're going to try to maximize what they can do with the project. And it's not necessarily a concern that we would face. But it's interesting to raise. You know, all hat, no cattle, or whatever the phrase is. So, okay, I think we have a lot of ideas that we've spoken about that have either been formally adopted by the land use committee in their discussions as how this has progressed, such that we should make a recommendation. And I'm trying to think of the best way to make the recommendation that incorporates the comments. I don't know if somebody has a suggestion on the best way to do that, or if this is something that what we've done in the past is when we've had kind of a host of these suggestions with a recommendation to the land use committee. I recall that we've asked staff to incorporate our comments into the recommendation, and they usually passed by me to make sure that the recommendation encapsulates the recommendations and the sentiment of planning board. Rebecca, that's how we've done that in the past, right?
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Yes, that's correct. I have a few notes for the first one, and I'm happy to append any comments or suggestions that the board has to the second recommendation as well.
Great. Yeah, I think it would be helpful for the board to see the proposed recommendation. We can vote on that tonight, but before it's formally sent over, I think it would be beneficial for us to see exactly what it is that we're sending to land use committee to make sure that it does reflect the comments that we've had. And I see that Dan has a request for a quick comment, so I would like to welcome Dan to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, of course, Rebecca and I can talk about this offline and send you what we come up with for the board to approve afterward. But I think board member Gino highlighted that the term that might be useful is that the numbers that I reviewed with you are specifically designed to be contextually appropriate. And so the proposal is being adjusted, but it's based off of contextually appropriateness with its surroundings. So that might be one way to phrase your recommendation if you support that strategy.
I think that makes sense. Would somebody like to move to recommend this with the conditions and suggestions that we've incorporated? Amelia.
May I ask for an item of clarification?
Sure.
As I recall, the question, the item that we had discussed with respect to sort of how a building with its mechanicals fit within the entire height envelope, I had framed it as a question as if a building were to come up with fewer stories than it was allowed to have, but a mechanical system that exceeded the threshold, but the entire thing were within the permitted height, the allowable building height envelope, would we want to require them to go down a special permit path? And I'm not clear on what our recommendation is going to be on that front, and I'm not trying to direct us one way or another. I had raised it as a genuine item that I felt was just open-ended.
I think it is, I agree with you. I think it is a strange posture to put an applicant in to realize that all of a sudden they need to apply for a special permit, which is the scenario that I think you posed a few minutes ago. I don't think we've ever had a circumstance where an applicant didn't know what they needed to ask for when they presented an application to the city. So I would be disinclined to put an applicant in a position where they don't know going in the relief that they're seeking. So I'm not sure how we would phrase this. Does anybody have a suggestion, or either by the staff or by the board?
Mr. Chair, I believe that the other recommendations from Vice Chair Aboff are readily supported by the staff and the other, and at least the Land Use Committee Chair. You might recommend that we continue to investigate this last item. I think that the decision, that the opinion is still out amongst the staff. There's kind of a debate still going on about that last issue.
Okay, I think that's fair to leave it an open question, because we are not the adopting body, we are the recommending body. So we can push that problem off to somebody else, which is my favorite thing to do. So does anybody else have any comments on this proposed amendment? Seeing none, the chair moves to recommend adoption of this proposed amendment with all of the comments and recommendations that have been made by the board that we will review in fulsome detail before it is formally sent along to the Land Use Committee. Seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Johan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
We have a unanimous recommendation with a host of comments and suggestions, which I think will be further fleshed out by the Land Use Committee and by the administration as we move ahead. Thank you all very much for that. Dan, thank you very much. Is there anything else that you need to tell us?
Nope, that's it. That's the only two items I have for tonight.
Okay, good. Go watch the Broads.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let me close this out and get back to a tab that's helpful to me. The agenda, that's the helpful thing. We're going to have a presentation next on the Assembly Square Neighborhood Plan update, but before we do that, I'd like to just take a brief 5-minute recess before we dive into that. So I would like to put the board in recess until 7:45, and we will reconvene then for a presentation on Assembly Square. Thank you. Okay, the board is all back. Is the staff back?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we are.
Okay. The planning board will now come back into session from its brief recess. And I would like to invite Rebecca, I think it's you, to start the discussion of the Assembly Square Neighborhood Plan update.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. Mr. Chair and members of the board, thank you very much for hearing us this evening. This has been a challenging couple of years, I think everyone agrees, and it's taken us longer than we would have liked to come before you tonight with this plan. Excuse me. But really, that's nothing compared to the journey that the Assembly Square neighborhood itself has taken. From an industrial site on the periphery, disconnected from the city center, to a center in its own right, from a largely empty space with little more than low density retail and pavement, to a rich and engaging place with a vibrant street life and a range of active and engaging uses. And from a time when the only voices that could be heard calling for the area and its future to be carefully considered were the members of the Mystic View Task Force, today where it presents the city's newest, most diverse, and fastest growing new neighborhood with more than 1,800 residents, over 600,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space, and 1.2 million square feet of commercial space, providing for 8,000 workers currently, with another 7,000 to come on board in the near future. Assembly Square has come a very, very long way. And the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division is very pleased and proud to be before you tonight with the Assembly Square Neighborhood Plan Update Draft. To borrow a phrase, we plan in poetry and we regulate in prose. Planning is visionary, it's aspirational. We plan with our head in the clouds and our eyes on the horizon, building a shared dream for the future. Tonight, you will hear from the team on their work building that dream collaboratively with residents, workers, property owners, and other stakeholders with interest in the neighborhood. And I want to take a moment to take special note of my colleague, Victor Nascimento, who worked diligently and tirelessly to develop relationships with all of the building managers and business owners in the square so that we could reach as many residents and local workers as possible to bring them into the process. And many of them were actually participating in the first time in a neighborhood planning process. That engagement work paid off well, and it resulted in one of the highest participation rates we've had on a planning effort for the city, with upwards of 500 active participants, over half of whom either lived in the square or came to it every day for work. Most importantly, you're going to hear about the plan that we've built to try to capture and document their shared dream for the future of their neighborhood. We bring the plan for you tonight, get your questions, comments, and critique so that we can finalize the proposal and bring it back to you for adoption, with the goal of delivering it to the mayor and council in the new year so that they can shepherd the square onto the next phase of its journey. Under their guidance, staff will work with the neighborhood to bring this dream to the ground, dig deep into the mechanics and details, and develop zoning and other regulatory pros that will help the residents, workers, property owners, and others who care deeply about the neighborhood see those dreams realized. We've had a great deal of input from the neighborhood and from the city at large, and I do want to note that the plan is still open for public comment. The plan draft is posted at our Summer Voice page at voice.somervillema.gov, where anybody can leave a comment in the draft itself, as well as reading and responding to other comments. Or as always, comments can be sent via email to planning@somervillema.gov. And we'll continue to collect comments until Friday, November 12th at noon. So with that, I would like to turn the microphone over to Pam King of Dover Coleman Partners, who will introduce her team and give us an overview presentation. And afterward, we'll all be happy to take your questions. Pam?
Thank you, Rebecca. Are you able to see my screen? All right. As Rebecca said, my name is Pamela King, and I am the studio director of Dover Colin Partners, and I was also the project manager for this Assembly Square neighborhood plan update. I was joined by a great team of professionals, Street Plans Collaborative, Howard Stein Hudson, Daedalus Advisory Services, and Zanetta Illustrations on this project. And we are the team that helped take the vision of the community and pull it into the plan. A lot of work had been done previously in the first Assembly Square neighborhood plan. That's where you get Assembly Row and the really changing of this neighborhood into something else. And so that there are residents in Assembly Square now, where before there was not. So as Rebecca mentioned, we're kind of in between the comments with the plan revisions and starting through the approval process and speaking with you. We had the presentation of the draft plan on October 13th, and as Rebecca noted, we will continue to take comments through November 12th and then update the plan accordingly. And so within the plan, we just a quick look at the table of contents. I know you guys have had this document. I hope you had a chance to read it and digest it, but if nothing else, just take a look at the executive summary. It gives kind of the highlights of what is within the background, the public process, the 5 big ideas, which are kind of the overarching principles, the different plan specific ideas, as well as talking about mobility and economics, and finishing out with implementation. Tonight, I want to focus on 2 of these chapters, although there'll be some elements from other ones. I want to kind of focus on the public process and the different details of the plan. So with the public process, we started over a year ago, and we started by meeting with different stakeholders, different property owners, talking to them individually, as well as then starting to talk to different groups like Assembly Connect. And one of the things, thanks to Victor's help, is we really reached out to the people that were living in Assembly Square. This is one of the neighborhoods of Somerville, and so everyone can come and have an opinion and see what they want and how they want to use this neighborhood. But we really wanted to make sure that we talked to the people that live there and find out what attracted them to this area, what is missing from the area, and how we can make it better for them and other individuals to then come and want to live and spend more time in Assembly Square. We had numerous online engagement throughout the process, particularly prior to our virtual charrette that was held November 30th through December 4th of last year. But also we then continued beyond that. We had many ways for people to give comments with image surveys and questionnaires, as well as to learn about the plan with different films, showing different scenarios of how the plan could look. And as I mentioned, numerous stakeholder meetings. So we were really taking input from many different ways and trying to reach everyone, but the big culmination of everything, the whole team I mentioned before, really focused during the charrette week, November 30th through December 4th of last year. And we really took the time to listen to people one-on-one and in small groups, starting with the kickoff presentation, where we kind of presented the background of where things were, and then we really asked people what they wanted, and had them present that back to the larger group so we could hear from everyone. We wanted everyone to be able to talk, and so it wasn't just the voices you always hear, it was every voice. Following that, we took what we heard and we were drawing on the plan. We were looking at plans and sections and elevations and how the streets can change and how we can connect better to the other neighborhoods. That was one of the big themes that came out of this, is Assembly Square feels very cut off. And so how do we connect with that while still making it a neighborhood from everyone? So different ideas came that week with some renderings that some were refined and some of them stayed from what they were from the charrette week. And then we asked, is this on the right track? This gave us our overall vision that then went into the plan and had more details added about what people were seeing from these images so they could really understand them. And then following the charrette, it didn't stop there. We continued to have different technical meetings with the city. We still met with different property owners. We were refining the plans, updating the renderings, drafting the overall report, meeting again with the Mystic River View Task Force. We met with them a few times following, making sure we heard everything from them and working to incorporate different ideas into the plan, as well as, you know, talking to the people that are living there. Again, we really wanted to make sure that we got it right. So this is a slide, the total involvement with the different ways we engaged people, from the charrette, the YouTube, different digital communication, the website views. We really reached a lot of people. Overall, we connected with, these numbers are kind of large, 2,500 people. And the reason they're large is it's not necessarily individual people, but those are the number of times that we were able to communicate with people one-on-one in different ways. So then moving into the big ideas, the overarching principles that came out of the charrette were these 5 key things that no matter what happens at Assembly Square, these are the ideas that need to be kept in mind. And so it's the building the great new places that are compatible with and respectful of context. And so this starts to, you know, where should the height be? Where should there not be height? And so working through this as you get into changing the land development regulations to match the vision will help this come to fruition. Increasing access to nature and to build sustainably, you know, looking at different parks and, you know, connecting to the riverfront and having that way to access nature throughout the site, not just on the edges. Demanding safe, comfortable, and interesting streets and increased transit. You know, people need to get around, and so how do they get to Assembly Square, as well as moving throughout it comfortably in whatever mode of transit they are on, whether they're on foot, bike, car, or in transit. We want people to feel comfortable and be able to get around. Growing revenue generating uses for Somerville. This is, in some ways, people can look at this area and say it's built out already, but we know that it's actually more of a blank slate as we have new uses and really use the land the way that it should, and trying to find new ways to bring new uses into the area and have people interact with this neighborhood. And then cultivating the Assembly Square community and connecting physically and socially to the broader city. This was really important throughout the charrette and building the plan. You know, we do have residents there, which is great, but it still feels very isolated. And so how can we make this feel, have more identity than Assembly Row, make the whole neighborhood feel as a community, and then connecting to all of Somerville and having it much more seamless than it is today. So with that, looking more directly at the plan, looking at kind of 4 separate kind of character areas is what ended up developing during the charrette. The first is looking at the Middlesex corridor and kind of the edge next to the interstate. The second is going to be Assembly Marketplace, and it's kind of that core of what's there now and how can that become the center for this neighborhood. Assembly Square South, you have some land there that's got a lot of some vacant buildings and some used. It's got the Home Depot, it's got some large parking lots. And so what can happen in this area as it starts to narrow down, as well as Assembly Point, which we talked to a lot of the residents and the property owners in this area. And, you know, perhaps this area has a different feel than the rest of Assembly Square. And so all these different areas are connected with different streets. And so street plans was looking at these different corridors and different intersections of how to get into Assembly Square and how to make those feel more welcoming and less suburban. And so the report in Chapter 5 highlights each of these with different street sections and actual plans of those different intersections, as well as looking at the bike network. We know that the bike and pedestrian network is very important for everyone. And so comparing what's there now and how, as these new projects come in and how when streets are revised, they can add these much more high quality bike networks, but then also how can that connect to the larger bike networks that are outside the boundaries of Assembly Square. So a little highlight on the Middlesex corridor. Middlesex Avenue right now feels very like a back alley. And so how do we make that be a very welcoming street and create a great place for the community and be a great street address? And so reimagining Middlesex Avenue was a big portion of the plan. In the street sections, we look at what could this street be. It had on-street parking and very wide lanes. And so looking at if you added how could this be the best street possible? Could there be a median, right sizing the lanes to make them narrower, but letting them still flow, having the on-street parking? And then are you able to get that high quality bike facility as well as wide sidewalks to allow on-street dining and strolling and activating the different businesses or residential or labs that are adjacent to the street? This goes along with the big idea of the designing safe streets and really looking at sidewalks and how do you make these accessible and for everyone, and pointing out that there are different portions of the sidewalk that have different uses. You have the frontage zone, which is where maybe some activity from the building spills out into the sidewalk. You still have that clear path that lets everyone be able to traverse the street uninterrupted. And then the furnishing and landscape zone, which kind of creates a space between the street and the clear path of the sidewalk, but it lets you have your street trees, your lamps, your trash cans, your benches without interrupting the flow of pedestrians and the sidewalk. Also, Middlesex Avenue connecting to Fellsway and having that high quality bike infrastructure join new high quality bike infrastructure on Fellsway that the city was saying that they're starting to consider and hopefully being able to create. And so then how, connecting into that network to connect to the rest of the city, narrowing the intersection so it's a much more urban intersection than it is currently today. And so really getting into the different details of how to create this to be a neighborhood and not just feel as suburban as it does today. Looking at the marketplace area, this is really the heart of the neighborhood. Today, it's got the marketplace and the parking, but then there's the vision of really creating a center and a square. This would have like more residential towards the center, which would be lower around the green space. And then towards the edges of it, the buildings can get taller because they're more on the edge and really kind of working to create this nice spine through the site. In some, as we said, this is a neighborhood, and neighborhoods have different things. They have infill, they have parks, they have streets, the natural features, compactness, and really this plan has all of that. You can see it all within just this marketplace area and also expanding into the other character areas. One of the big things we heard from everyone was that, there's no center to Assembly Square. There's no square there, which a lot of the other Somerville neighborhoods, they're built around, squares, Union Square and others. And so this is really trying to create that and put that center, whether it's a green or it's a square, having that good public space for everyone to be able to have the neighborhood build up around it. Continuing down to what was called Assembly Square South, and looking at how could that redevelop, again, trying to get a higher edge next to the highway, also for noise, but also particulate matter in order to make the air a better quality further into the site. And so looking at this, one of the key ideas was that it can be developed over time. And so, the Home Depot can stay in operation, but then perhaps, where there's vacant buildings, things could start to develop and create an edge for the South Point and really creating a seam and a center down at Assembly Point, while still creating great civic spaces within this area. You can have the dining, a good civic building, and so building upon, this is at the edge of where the hospital area is, with their workers, and so giving them a place to go as well. And then the Assembly Point microdistrict really is unique unto itself. This is the one portion of the site where there is a smaller property ownership. There's a lot more parcels in this area, smaller parcels, where the rest of Assembly Square tends to have much larger property ownership under single people. And so this is where we have an opportunity to really keep that fine-grained, funky feel and, kind of a heart of what Assembly Square is, and keeping it, very unique, very makerspace. I know we were talking to some people who own in this area, and they have workshops, and they want to keep those and hopefully bring their family to this area as well. And so having this not necessarily have such the high buildings as the other areas, but still having a very unique and dense feel. And then the report finalizes with the implementation chapter and kind of goes through each of the big ideas and kind of how to work on getting there. So really, although it's a vision plan, it's also trying to give steps of really how to build and make that vision a reality. So again, for people that don't have it, the report is on the Somerville website and still available for comment. And so now I want to pass it back to you and answer any questions you may have.
And well, thank you very much. I think this is a fantastic job that you guys have done so far, both with the engagement with the public and with the presentation that you made tonight. I'm really excited to see where we can go with the rest of the whole Assembly area with its component parts. I've been to Assembly Square my entire life, and I always forget how big of an area we're talking about. Usually I just think it was, the old Assembly Square Mall, and then I realized there was a whole bunch of other stuff that we just developed. Now the area with Home Depot and Middlesex Ave. And I think you did a really great job in presenting how it can really come together in a cohesive way. So I'm very, very excited to see what we can achieve with this neighborhood plan once the public comment period has concluded and we can make a vote for adoption after we have some discussion on it in a little bit more detail. But I will just make one kind of specific comment that I love the way that the plan is preserving the feel of what you're calling the micro district. I think that's a great idea because it is a very different type of development in that whole area that much more so than what's in kind of the remainder of it. So the fact that the plan is looking to recognize that kind of uniqueness and preserve it is a really nice feature to the overall plan. You isolated it a little bit by making it its own thing, but I think it is connective with the remainder of the different kind of neighborhoods within the whole Assembly area. So I want to thank you for that and congratulate you and everybody that's been working on this. I was hiding Rebecca's face with my box here, and I'm sorry, and Rebecca too, to get us to a point where we can have this presentation and this discussion. So that's what I'll say. Obviously, we're not taking a vote on this tonight, but I look forward to the night when we can. So does anybody else have any comments or questions on the presentation of where we are sitting right now? Debbie?
No, I just also wanted to commend everybody. It's really incredible. And also the amount of engagement you had is unbelievable. One, I didn't realize how many people lived in Assembly at this point. But also, I mean, kudos to you. That's fabulous. I did want to raise, which I know we saw the public comment that came out about the inquiry about extending the review period. And I just did want to voice that I think that to me, that does sound like a good idea. I know it's been a long time coming that the plans come out, and it does seem like even a month might be a long time to get through such a large document, particularly given, that we're coming off of an election that a lot of people have been sort of focusing on and maybe haven't had a chance to kind of really digest things. And also thoughts about what, the fact that we do have a new administration and a number of new council folks coming on. If it makes sense to allow some more time for people that maybe weren't part of the neighborhood that frankly may not have focused on it as much until the plan came out to kind of really dig in.
Thanks, Debbie. I saw Amelia next. I think I saw Amelia, right?
Yes, sorry, my mouse stopped working. Had to find a different way to turn the mute button off. Thank you so much for this presentation. I think what is a really excellent draft plan. I know this has been a long time coming, and there were a lot of elements in it that I was really grateful to see highlighted, including sort of consideration of mode share and mobility and sea level rise, among other things. So thank you very much for all of your work on this. I was also really impressed with the degree of digital outreach that was done in a year when in-person outreach was a struggle. I think that as we've continued down the path of having virtual planning board meetings, one thing that's come up a few times is that digital engagement really gives people who might not otherwise have had the bandwidth or opportunity to participate an avenue to weigh in. So I feel really positive about the wide net that was cast here, but also the fact that we probably captured some people who might otherwise not have been able to participate in a live in-person meeting. So thank you for that. I wanted to add one comment for consideration, if I may, as any further iterations are refined, which is in the last round of the Summer Vision 2040 plan, we sort of heard from a constituent group who had not been very vocal before, and that was just considerations about aging in place and sort of provisions being made for the elderly in our community. And I think the plan does a really beautiful job of emphasizing accessibility and family friendliness. But I would also ask us to take a look at it with a lens of, in my mind, Assembly is one of the places in Centerville that's probably most hospitable to someone in the community who's looking to age in place, because it is sort of condensed and has one of everything and has a lot of buildings. And as we move forward, there will probably be elevator buildings and that's more accessible. So I would just ask, as we do a final read through, to sort of think with that lens also, since I didn't see it explicitly called out. Thank you.
Rob, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to also commend folks on a really robust plan here. There's a lot to dig through. I'll keep my comments as brief as I can. One, I wanted to just echo member Howard Easton's statement in support of extending the open comment time. I've got, I mean, I don't see necessarily, I mean, I don't see a reason not to. And I know that a lot of stakeholders are interested in, digging in deeper. And I can sympathize, having been through this drill myself on a few neighborhood plans. It is a lot to digest in nights and weekends. I had a few very specific comments and one question. One comment that I had was, as I'm reviewing the civic space plan, which in the document itself appears, I want to say, I think this is page 49 of the document. I noticed, like, I really appreciate sort of the spine that's kind of being envisioned of a pedestrian and bike friendly kind of spine. And I don't know that it's got a name yet or a label, but it's Road K, where it crosses kind of the existing project that's underway. And then it's kind of labeled 1B north of that and 1D south of that, and then terminating down into the Assembly Point neighborhood. I guess one comment I had there was, I see visually that, could be an exciting pedestrian walkway and a exciting kind of linear civic space. But given that there's a project already underway, with a master plan special permit, I believe already permitted, kind of in the middle of that, one question I have is, how does this plan facilitate connecting that spine from an urban design framework? Sort of linking up sidewalks and pathways and crosswalks and the green space, and making sure that it sort of has that kind of cohesive, pedestrian friendly feel, rather than what I think sometimes what can happen, and I'm sort of thinking about like the Boston waterfront, where things just kind of come out feeling a little disjointed, it feels a little lost, or as you kind of are walking along and all of a sudden the sidewalk, went from 18 feet to 6 feet, et cetera. So that's sort of one kind of comment on that image. And as long as we're looking at this image, this is actually really helpful. The other question I had was, there's this little stub of land south of the Orange Line tracks that kind of gets lopped in here on all the diagrams in terms of being within the study boundary. And I know that that's kind of a, off to the side, but I'm just curious if the plan gave any thought to that. And part of the reason why I ask is, I know that's probably a wishful thinking, but someday it would be wonderful if the Boston Harbor Walk through Ryan Playground over on the Charlestown side may connect up with the Draw 7 Park, maybe not in my lifetime, but somebody's. That would be something I would be interested in kind of hearing more about, whether that was considered. And I guess my last comment is, as I'm reviewing the plan, I still want to make sure I understand kind of net increase in parking from where we're at today in terms of program spots to where this plan moves us in the future, and kind of the road network that's available to support that level of throughput, if you will. So those are my comments, and I know that this is an ongoing conversation, and again, I appreciate being able to dive in. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rob. I'm kind of, all the images are kind of small, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody's hand that's up. Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments. I really love the document. I read it front to back and found it actually quite readable, so kudos to that. Couple comments. Actually, I was really enchanted by Assembly Point. I feel like you kind of captured a really nice feel, and it kind of came to mind for me as like a naturally affordable sort of fab or artisan district potentially. And I was just, really pleased to kind of see that in the plans. So, any like that sort of use I found, really nice, especially where in other parts of the city, fab districts are like hard to come by, right? The couple points on mobility along Middlesex. So you had sort of one-way bike lanes or going along 28 next to underneath 93. Did you guys consider, I'm just sort of curious if you considered two-way bike lanes on both sides underneath 93 there? Just thinking about sort of bike commuters, sort sort of crossing back and forth, it might be useful to have two-way intersections. Maybe that's a little too detailed for comments right now. I'm just trying to think about passing blue bikes while commuting. It's hard to do in a 4-foot bike lane. And then second question about, or comment about mobility was, you know, the commuter rail runs right by Assembly Square. And the last, so that particular commuter rail line, I think the last stop that it has before it reaches North Station is in Malden. So I don't know if the study incorporated potentially, you know, whatever petitioning the MBTA might look like these days about, you know, a potential commuter rail stop in Assembly, so you don't have to go all the way in to come back out again, and really making that a commutable spot without a car. And then one last comment, which is, you know, I really liked that, you know, you guys were thinking holistically about all of the different uses that could be in Assembly Square. And as we think about new development coming in and building that space, balancing those uses so it doesn't become all residential or all retail or all lab. And I was wondering if you had envisioned any mechanisms for really just reporting what is already in Assembly, what's in planning, versus, you know, sort of what we envision those mixes to look like. So really the comment here is, what are the ways that you guys are envisioning to help, you know, the community at large, us, the residents, developers, really understand what is already in Assembly as for square footage and what's still missing, you know, as you look back at this plan. So those are my comments, but great work. And I really like the step down. I think the overall massing is very, very nice.
Thanks, Aaron. Does anybody else have any? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo my colleagues' comments and positive feedback. I thought this was a very thoughtful study, and I really applaud the engagement of the community, and I certainly appreciate the time and effort placed into the study. So for me, what's really critical, I just have two comments. What's really critical is really connectivity, which has been addressed in the plan, and I think that making sure that Assembly Square, Assembly Row expands out, yet it's still connected to the other neighborhoods within the city of Somerville, and the residents of the city of Somerville feel like Assembly Square, Assembly Row is one of our vibrant neighborhoods. I think that's really important, and maintaining that is going to be critical. And I think the other comment is inclusivity. I know that it's one of the most diverse neighborhoods. I just want to make sure that that's maintained where residents, shoppers, visitors, workers, people who are coming through the neighborhood as it's being reimagined, continue to feel welcome and feel like it is part of their community, whether they're residents of the city of Somerville or the greater Boston area. And I think that's something that you know is a key area of focus for me, and I certainly welcome the comments of residents and others as well. So again, thank you, great job, but just keep it up.
Anybody else have any comments or questions for the plan? I think everybody has had a chance to speak. I think Rebecca had wanted to address one or two items after we've spoken, so I would invite Rebecca to say what you wanted to clarify.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the rest of the board. One of the most interesting things for me as a planner, and it was something I struggled with, I know, on the board, that I think the public sometimes doesn't quite have an inferior view of the work we do as planners. and that obviously the community cares about the intersection of where the rubber hits the road, and wants to work out all of those details. We're very sensitive to the question about the new counselor, the new council and the new mayor, obviously. I would note that the council for this area was reelected. He ran unopposed, and I think he had something like 97% of the vote. And he will be the one who takes the professional project of citizen engagement and of developing renderings and doing the technical evaluation and working with the consultants to sort of calibrate the different needs and put together a proposal. And he will be the one shepherding, Councilor McLaughlin will be the one who will be shepherding the next step, which is deeply involved with the community of the city at large, because it will involve amendments to the zoning ordinance. So I do want to make sure that we acknowledge that this is not the end of the plan. This isn't even the midpoint of the plan. We have an enormous job ahead of us, taking this sort of dream and bringing it forward, and there will be much, much, much more public comment involved in this process. The question about the little slivers of land, it's a very interesting one. I know that the challenge down there is that much of some of those odd little parcels are owned by the state, and of course, coordinating with the state is always a challenge. But the one thing that I will say that we heard repeatedly from the community, both the neighbors in the neighborhood and the community at large, is that connectivity is a serious concern, and the recommendation, the implementation chapter comes along with guidelines for how to take that work forward. You know, we've already seen the new pedestrian bridge is now going forward, which will connect Assembly Square to trails and businesses and other potentials across the river. We're extremely excited about that, and we're looking forward to participating with our state partners and with partners in other cities to really flesh that out, because as Pamela noted, one of the big concerns that everybody has shared in this area is, for too long, this has been a disconnected island in a city that prides itself on being tightly knit and closely walkable. And then finally, to Ms. Gino's point, as a part of the larger Summer Vision 2040 process, we have been working on what we call the Summer Vision Tracker. And it is a mechanism that we use to measure the metrics that we're tracking across the city for all of the different priorities that we set as a part of our larger citywide comprehensive plan. I'm probably going to get smacked by the director, but I know that it's a future goal of ours to find ways to make that more public in the way of a dashboard and ready reports. But at this point, we're still collecting data. But that's definitely one of our longer term goals, is to find a way to frankly share and brag a little bit about the accomplishments that the city has achieved, because, you know, residents have driven us forward, and we thank them for it every day, to be innovative and to be at the front of all of these questions. So I am happy to take any other questions that you may have, and I'm also happy to let Pam address any questions about the substance of the plan that she felt was relevant to address at this moment.
Rebecca, thank you very much for that clarification on where we are in the process specifically. I think it's important for people to remember as we move forward, because we always have to remind people that there is a lot more planning to go before we get to start putting buildings in the ground and building roads and building parks and figuring out where things should actually be. That this is not the very beginning, but pretty close to the beginning of moving forward with this neighborhood comprehensive plan. So does anybody else have any comments or questions that they have before we continue discussion on this to the 18th? Yes, Sarah.
Mr. Chair, just one quick one on public discussion, just sort of maybe a comment that might help. I think it might be unclear to people like when they should comment about what kinds of things. So, you know, the comments that we received by email seem to be a lot around like mobility associations or, you know, riverfront, like sort of particular interest groups. And perhaps it might be helpful for planning staff or someone associated with the plan to reach out to them and say, this is when, you know, is a good time to express your particular concerns, because this is when we're going to be putting, you know, rubber to the road, right? And when you can really impact what the actual plan is going to look like, or a as-built kind of thing.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think there's one part of it that we didn't talk about, and that was the comment period, the request for extending the comment period. We had left it at a month, just because there was so much, you know, sort of, you saw the hard numbers in the presentation. This plan, we saw it as being a summary of the decisions that were made by the neighborhood itself. So a lot of the requests for extended time is from other parts of the city that may not have been active participants because it's not their neighborhood. So you know, sort of we carefully considered how long the comment period should be, because there were, you know, sort of so many residents involved, and you know, sort of we've had people reach out since, the property owners in the point who are ecstatic as to what they've seen in the draft. So I am reluctant to extend it further, because this has been going on so long. And like I said, the voices that we heard that were, you know, sort of summarized in the draft were the folks in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Sarah. This is, I share your reticence to extend the comment period based on what you said, and also the fact that this is the beginning of the process and there will be substantially more community engagement as we move forward. So, if anybody has anything else they'd like to add at this time, please do it. Rebecca.
Mr. Chair, on that particular point, I just wanted to reiterate that the comment period is still open, and people can go to our Summer Voice page, again at voice.somervillema.gov, and give us your comments either in the draft, or you can also see other people's comments and respond to them. We've had a really robust set of comments come from there already, and we're excited to have more. And we're also happy to take comments the old-fashioned way by emails to planning@somervillema.gov until noon on Friday the 12th.
Great. Thank you very much. The chair moves to continue discussion on the Assembly Square plan until our meeting on the 18th, seconded by Jahan. Roll call vote. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Okay, we will take this up again in a few weeks. Thank you all very, very much for the presentation. It was great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have a number of three, to be specific, hearings that we're going to be bringing up. One is a continuation, and two are new. I would like to invite 315 Broadway, looks like Pilates RX LLC, to be unmuted, whoever the applicant or whether agent is, to make a presentation on this change of use.
Yes, Mr. Chair, can you hear me? This
Yes.
is Attorney Adam Dash coming to you live from 48 Grove Street in Somerville. Good to virtually see all of you. So I guess you can see me as well. So here we are. So what this is going to be is, I guess Rebecca also, if you could unmute Damon Seidel, who is the architect from Mixed Design in Somerville, and also with us is Ali Duffy, who is the principal behind Pilates RX. So what this is going to be is, let me see, I can share my screen. So let's do that. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Let's see. Click to start screen sharing. Do you see the picture of the building?
Yes.
All right. So this is the building we're talking about, which is the building that was built under a recent planning board decision, and this was in 2012. To the right of the building is the liquor store, and then to the right of that is the defunct Star Market site. So the part that we're talking about is here, the commercial space on the corner of Broadway and Temple Street, which goes along the right there. That sort of right commercial front first floor space. Upstairs is residential. So the applicant's is leasing the property, and this is part of our diligence period, in order to establish this small scale fitness services use and a healthcare services use. And we need special permits for both, because the Pilates and the personal training is in the fitness use category, but under the definition, physical therapy and chiropractic falls within the healthcare services. And both, being that this is a pedestrian street district, both of them require the special permit. So there are going to be two sister businesses that are women-owned businesses here, Pilates RX LLC, which Ali Duffy owns and specializes in part in pre and postnatal patient health and care. And there's a second business, the Run RX LLC, which will sublet part of the space and is owned and operated by another female physical therapist that specializes in providing physical therapy and personal training for runners. These two businesses currently operate together at 2 Alpine Street in Somerville, and they're relocating to this space. The rear of the building, from when it was permitted originally, has 16 parking spaces used in common by the occupants of the building, which includes the Pilates RX folks. However, as you know, parking is not required at this space because it's in the transit area. This stretch of Broadway and next to the defunct Star Market needs economic development, and this Somerville business is a perfect fit. It fills this long-time vacant storefront. A business is relocating within Somerville to continue serving its customers in the community. It's a new type of business for this neighborhood and will diversify the mix. It's in the health field, which complements the fact that there's the Walgreens next door. There's good access by public transit and the Broadway bike lanes. It adds a woman-owned business to the neighborhood, and these dual businesses add even more diversity. I can show you that. Let me see. So that is that. This is the view. I don't know if you can see. This is the view from the Temple Street angle. If the pictures aren't changing like some of the prior people, just let me know. But this is the corner looking from the other side of the space. This is standing at the liquor store on Temple Street. So what we're proposing on the interior, just to show you a very simple plan. We have a more detailed one, but to be just very simple, there are going to be some studios along here, an open studio here, private studios and office and reception, fairly straightforward, relatively small space. So the reason we have these private studios here, and because of the nature of the work that's being done and people are going to be worked on with physical therapy, the idea is to have some ability to frost the first part of the glass on some of the windows on the space. This is our signage that shows that there are going to be 2 blade signs, one for Pilates RX, one for the Run RX. There's going to be some small wording on the signage saying similar things. And then the idea is to allow for some privacy for the studio back there, just because of the nature of the stretching and the working on people. This is more of a schematic of it, which shows the amount of the glass. And the idea was to take it up just to sort of the spandrel here, just to make it look cleaner. I would note that the original zoning approval in 2012 said that, and I believe it's in the staff report, that retail portions of the facade must meet a guideline of having 75% transparent material on the ground floor. So I'd say that we have the architect here as well if there are any detailed questions, but really we're here for the use special permits. That's the detail of the blade signage. It's not terribly interesting, but so the idea was to do this, and we think that this is a really good use of the space. As you know, the space has been vacant for some time. It's been tough to fill for the landlord, and we request the planning board to issue the special permits for the fitness services and healthcare services use in the mixed use building at 315 Broadway.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before we proceed with public testimony, does anybody on the planning board have any comments or questions of the applicant for the pretty straightforward presentation for a special permit for use changes? Okay. This is a public hearing. I'm going to try to see if I can see more people who might want to speak, if any. I am going to open up this public hearing to anybody that wants to speak in support of the application at 315 Broadway. If you want to speak in support, please raise your hand on the little button. Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing and open it up to anybody that wants to speak in opposition or otherwise express concern about the application 315 Broadway. Exercise the little raised hand button, please. Okay. I do not see any. Oh, I see one. I see Daniel Siciliano. So if Daniel Siciliano can please be unmuted to provide testimony, we would welcome it.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to know how this benefits this area. We have 2 medical facilities, one at the corner of Marshall Street and one at the old Boston Market location. I remember going into the facility at Marshall Street, and it needed, I had a massive cut needing stitches, and they turned me away. So that big building in the end never benefited this community, this neighborhood. What I'm trying to get at though is I can't see this benefiting this area at all. I don't think anybody in this area would have any interest. It is, I had explained to Jesse, Alderman Jesse, about this. I just think that parking is such a commodity here. It's one of my main concerns. You know, everybody's coming by bicycle, by bus, but in reality, they don't. My tenants have to park blocks away now to access my building here at 24 Temple. I'm directly behind this building, and I'm just that's why I'm just against it pretty much, is the parking, and it's just not for this neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody that wants to also speak in opposition or express concern for the application? Seeing none, I will close that portion of the public hearing and reopen it for discussion by members of the planning board and of staff as necessary with the applicant. So I would like the applicant to address the concerns raised by Mr. Siciliano about the engagement with this proposed change of use with the Winter Hill neighborhood, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Adam Dash for the applicant. While there are no other uses like this in this neighborhood, the specialization of pre and postnatal physical therapy and care for the Pilates RX, as well as the specialization in treatment of runners for the Run RX. These are services currently provided in Somerville in a different location that are moving here. So the customers are from, Somerville, pretty much from this area, and being able, their old location, they have to leave, and they're looking for a new location, and they want to stay in a place convenient to their customers who will come here. They had very little parking at their old space, and the parking, as I said, there are 16 spaces in the back for the entire building that are sort of first come, first serve, and that's the way it'll operate at this building as well. The other medical uses aren't this, and the combination of the fact that Ms. Duffy's an actual physical therapist, in addition to doing Pilates and the fitness piece, it's sort of an interesting mix of these two businesses that are kind of intertwined and have been working together in their old location. So I think we would submit that, in fact, that there may be other medical-ish uses, but they're not this. This isn't a place you're going to go to have your broken leg mended. This is a completely different sort of thing.
And as I understand what you said, a very specific type of medical facility for an existing kind of patient base.
Correct. Yes, their patient base is here already, and they're already doing whatever they're doing, getting there now. I mean, these are people who are more interested in being physically fit. They're the runners. They're the people interested in getting in shape after having a baby, and having treatment for whatever issues they have as a result. And so that is the very purpose of these businesses. And so these people tend to be more on the bike heavier side, I would think, than most of the population.
Thanks. Are there any comments or questions by members of the board before we proceed? Yes, Rob.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm looking at the, I guess it's page 2 of the application package. And I just want to clarify, is the simulated frosted glass, is the proposal that be applied to every window of the business, or just the corner? I think it's every window. I just wanted to confirm that.
I guess we have Mr. Seidel. Damon, do you want to speak to that? He's the architect who drew the plan. I don't know if you've enabled him to unmute himself, Rebecca. But.
Okay.
This is Rebecca. Yes, Damon, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Yes, it's not every window. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 openings. One of which is the front door, which is a fully glazed storefront, and the window to the left of the door will be clear. The door itself and the vestibule will all be clear, and it will be the next two windows, which are 3 windows around the corner. There's a bay on the far. Actually, Adam, if you go back to the photograph, might be easier. There we go. Yes, perfect. So you can see the window to the left of the door will be completely clear. The door will be clear. Then the 3 windows to the right of the door, 1, 2, 3, will be frosted up to the mullion. The fourth one in the bay will be frosted up to the mullion. And then there's actually a fifth one that is kind of hiding behind the light post. Half of that will be frosted up to the first mullion.
Thank you. Well, that helps me think about this project, this application a little bit more clearly. You know, one just, I guess, concern that I have is, you know, to me, you know, this is a corner commercial location in an area of transformation and high foot traffic. And I, you know, generally would be somewhat hesitant to, you know, approve or move forward with a plan to frost glass on, I think, something that has a lot of potential to be, you know, kind of a, you know, open and kind of facilitate kind of the vibrancy that we're looking for in some of these commercial areas. But in looking at your plan, you know, if the idea is that the, you know, open studio area would not necessitate frosted glass, I guess my question is, you know, when you were designing your build out, did you ever consider the possibility of kind of flip-flopping it so that the open studio portion is on the corner and make use of the kind of large windows that I guess would not necessitate frosting, and move the private studios and the private office to the other side of the build out? Is that something that through the chair was considered as you're looking at the space?
That was not considered. That was not the primary. The frosting of the glass and the location of the private studios versus the open studio wasn't the primary. The privacy wasn't the primary driver. The Run RX has literally a runway, a turf runway that was accommodated well on the left side of the vestibule in that open studio space, as well as the desire for a large blank wall to do exercises against, including throwing exercise balls up against that large wall. So the driver of how they were using the two physical therapists were using the space was the larger driver of this. And also the desire for, you know, the private office, for instance, is that it's private just for the two, for the two owners and for any staff that they might have, which at the moment I think it's just the two owners. And it would be nice to have a window for that office rather than putting it back by the bathrooms. And enclosing any space back by the bathrooms is tricky because of circulation and would add additional hallway space, which isn't usable. So those were the considerations we did take into account. And rather than trying to prioritize the privacy, which wasn't necessarily top of mind when they were looking at this space.
Thank you very much. Does staff want to address some of the questions that were raised by Rob on this, or has the applicant done a sufficient job in responding?
This is Raisa speaking. To staff's understanding, only 25% of the windows were being covered with frosted glass. To staff's knowledge, that was the case. I'm not sure if more is being covered. The gym is a new and a unique use in that area. There are no fitness services in that general vicinity. So staff at this point would recommend
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca. I am not sure if we've just lost Risa. I think that the point that she was making is that staff is comfortable that the applicant has, with the submission that they made, was conforming to the code with regard to how much of the glass was frosted. If Mr. Dash has updates to report that exceed that, we will be happy to take a look. But my colleague Risa is very thorough, and so I know that I coordinated with her to make sure that he had verified all of that. So staff is confident of the status.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to respond to that. Yeah, this is Adam Dash again. That yeah, we did go back through this, and I was talking with Raisa earlier today. That I just want to clear up any misunderstanding here, because this is a little odd because this building was built under the old zoning, but we're coming in to fill the space after the new zoning is passed, and so the requirements are a little weird. And so we wanted to make sure that we were very clear on this. I know Damon has brought this up also earlier today, so I don't want anyone to be misled by it. So I guess, Damon, you want to talk about the percentage of the frosted glass and what could be done if to address maybe Mr. Buchanan's concern?
Sure. I also clarify, if we're trying to hit the 25% target, is that the number that's the number in the report? Is that the correct number that we're looking? That is the requirement?
Well, that's the requirement of the zoning, of the decision that built this building, was
Okay.
that there be 25% of the windows. I have the actual decision in front of me. Actually, I pulled it up while I was listening to the other cases. That the retail portions of the facade meet the guideline of having 75% transparent material on the ground floor. It is unclear to me entirely whether the planning board intended that to mean each individual retail space had to be 75% transparent, or all of the retail spaces taken together had to be 75% transparent, and it's not particularly stated in that decision. We can speak to the number on this particular retail space, and then I guess go from there. Damon, so you want to take that up? Because this is more of a math problem that's more in your domain.
Yeah, that's fine. So in terms of getting the amount of privacy that the clients of Allie and Gabby need, we're looking at the height of the frosting on those windows that are facing into the two private studios, and we could adjust the height of that, particularly because the sidewalk slopes down around the corner and down Temple Street. So people's eye level will be lower as they walk past the windows on that side, to hit the 25% at a particular height. So if that's the requirement, that's what we can do is run we were hoping to just run it up cleanly to the mullion, the first mullion, which is at 7 feet above the floor. But we can run it up to a height that gives us 25%, and that would be what I think Allie and Gabby would prefer, to try, and they would prefer to have the clean look up to the mullion, but they would be certainly more than willing to go to the 25% if that was necessary.
Yeah, while taking into consideration not having pedestrians. Yeah, sorry.
I will say this, it has been noted by staff that this does meet the requirements of the code, and I don't think we need to spend an inordinate amount of time talking about frosted glass for something that's reasonably straightforward and something that staff has already said meets the requirements of the code. But what I'd like to do is, if in fact we vote on this and it does not meet the requirements, we can come back and add a condition to require that staff works with the applicant to ensure conformity with the code if it doesn't. But it has been already noted by staff that it does, so I don't see a reason to get into a philosophical discussion on glass frosting right now.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Rebecca speaking.
Yes.
One of the requirements that is standard for all cases is that prior to approval, the applicant will need to submit an as permitted set. And so there is an opportunity for us to work with the applicant, ensure that the amount of glass is absolutely consistent with the requirements, and make sure that that is reflected in the final set of approved plans in accordance with the board's intention.
Was your use of reflected intentional, talking about windows? Because I like it.
Completely unintentional, but I'll take it anyway.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Rice, if I may interrupt. I'm sorry, someone was knocking on my door, so I was not able to speak properly. I just wanted to address that if it's not 25%, then I would be comfortable writing it as a condition, just because staff thought that it would be 25% of the frosted glass that's being covered.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm sure, Mr. Chair, that we can work this all out, and we all just want to comply. So
You absolutely can work this out. And that is part of our usual condition with materiality and all this stuff.
yeah, but it's the use special permits that we're actually asking for at this point.
Exactly. So there are two. There's a special permit to establish a fitness services use and a special permit to establish a healthcare services use on a pedestrian street. We have reviewed the application. We've had testimony. We have considered the required things that we need to under the code, which is the plan and the policies established by the city, the intent of the zoning district where the property is located, the maintenance of a diverse blend of commercial uses within the neighborhood. As you said, there's nobody else like you in this neighborhood. The existing concentration of uses from the same category within the neighborhood, the availability of the same services within the neighborhood, again, there are none, the availability of comparable commercial spaces within the neighborhood. So with the board having reviewed the considerations and made findings that in fact it does meet the considerations that we need to, the chair moves to approve the special permit to establish a fitness services use, seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Okay, we have a unanimous vote. The chair, with the same considerations and findings, moves to approve the special permit for a healthcare services use on a pedestrian street, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
We have a unanimous vote. Congratulations. Thank you for the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Okay. Next up, we will have, when I get the agenda, let's have a presentation on 371 Highland Avenue because we have not yet had a presentation by this applicant. So if I could ask for the applicant and or their agent to be unmuted, and for whomever would like to have their screen shared.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Attorney Ann Vigorito, 424 Broadway, Somerville. I am here on behalf of the applicant for 371 Highland Avenue. If I could ask that my team be unmuted, Will Chalifant from Calsa Design, as well as Stephen Saragusa from Design Consultants. The applicant is on as well. He does not need to be unmuted at this time, but his name is Christos Palvidas. Thank you once again. We're here to present regarding 371 Highland Avenue. As I stated, the team, Will Chalifant from Calsa Design, Steve Saragusa from Design Consultants are here this evening as well. The owner applicant is JNC Realty Trust. Just to give you a landmark, this is the former gas station service station location on Highland Avenue. Sits right before entering into the main part of Davis Square. This is an MR4 zoning district, and the proposal is to develop a 4-story LEED gold general building with 23 residential dwelling units, 4 of which will be inclusionary units. These will be rental units, not condominiums. There will be commercial space on the first level, just shy of 2,000 square feet. There will be 13 motor vehicle parking spaces, 22 long-term bicycle parking spaces, and 6 short-term bicycle parking spaces. The green score is 0.386, which is a little bit above the 0.25 minimum requirement. The site is located within a half mile of a transit area, and the relief sought is the proposed construction of the general building, which does require site plan approval, and the residential component, which requires a special permit. We did have 2 neighborhood meetings on this project. The first one was on March 9th of 2020, so this was prior to the COVID shutdown, so it was a live in-person neighborhood meeting. It was very well received by abutters. Attorney DiGirolamo hosted that meeting. At that time, there were no concerns or objections raised on this project. The second meeting was on March 10th of 2021. That was via Zoom. There were various questions raised from neighbors. This was very well attended via Zoom. There was questions from trash to construction, but all of the answers were answered satisfactorily by the development team that evening. This project did have 3 meetings with the UDC in October, November, and December of 2020. So you will see what I think actually Will Chalifant already has them up on the screen. This was our final version. We're very pleased. I mean, 3 meetings with them and quite a bit of work on the architect side. There is a condition that's proposed to resubmit a new TAP, and we did have design consultants. When I saw that condition the other day as I reviewed the staff report, I did speak to Steve Saragusa at Design Consultants, and there was a revised TAP sent to planning this AM. I mean, I'm sure, they're reviewing it, but it may not be obviously, for this meeting, but we wanted to be ahead of the situation and be proactive for the board. So at this point, I will mute myself and have Will Chalifant now present the plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Nice to see everyone again. I will try to keep it quick because I'm sure some of you need to go to bed. So as Ann mentioned, this project's actually been going on a little bit longer than was mentioned. We had a couple meetings back in 2019 as well. This is one of those projects that got caught in the middle of the pandemic, unfortunately. But that being said, it's actually been good, nice because we've had extra review on it. I will quickly go through this. I won't bore you with the civil, but I do want to start with the landscape here because this stretch of Highland is actually one of the few stretches that has 0 street trees. So one of the nice aspects of this development is we'll be adding 4 new street trees to a stretch that's somewhat barren, being previously 1 continuous curb cut for the service station. We're also providing some, slight buffering of green space on the right-hand side. West Street actually has some nice mature trees, which we are intending to maintain and not disturb at all. In addition to that, as Ann mentioned, this will be a LEED Gold certifiable building. And as part of our open space requirements and resident open space requirements, we're providing a common roof deck, which will be surrounded by green roof with some trellises and some nice outdoor spaces to enjoy the evening. We're actually sort of surrounded by some undeveloped buildings right now. So that was not a concern of the neighbors, was this roof deck. In fact, our first proposal to the neighborhood was a much more traditional building in style. And we were told, we don't want anything boring. We want something a little bit different over here. So that was very nice to hear. So I'll quickly go through the these are just some of the landscape details. One thing I just want to clarify, we're actually 22 dwelling units. There's a 23 would be including the retail space itself, which is a little under 2,000 square feet. And I'll just quickly go through the plans. Now, we are providing some underground parking, obviously being so close to Davis Square, the proximity to the train and bus lines, this is in the transit zone. But the developer felt from a long-term standpoint and specifically for maybe the commercial tenant and their employees, that it'd be nice to have some parking beneath grade. So we are providing some of that, 13 spaces rather, to be specific. So on the ground level, we have an anchor commercial space towards the Davis Square side. Highland Ave is to the bottom of the screen here. And we're providing an at-grade large bicycle room for the tenants, as well as right now we're showing it as a fitness room. This could very well become, a community space or something like that. That's sort of an ever-changing use now that the pandemic has hit, as well as large recycling and trash area, which will be brought out through these doors into a private trash company. So one thing, like I mentioned, we're adding these new street trees. We're also treating the sidewalk itself with some new brick pavers. The thought is potentially we could have a cafe of some sort at this corner, so we could have some nice cafe seating along here with this widened sidewalk and really enhance the pedestrian experience. And we'll go through quickly here the upper floor plans. These units stack as they go up. As I mentioned, 22 units, predominantly one bedroom plus sort of den space, a couple 2 bedrooms, but mostly one bed and a couple studios. Again, the roof, but the landscape plan was really much more illustrative of that. Now, the MR4, well, all of the MR zones, I'm going to kind of quick jump to the rendering here. But one of the unique factors here is that when the building is over 100 feet in length, and this one is actually 117, planning has directed us to really break this into reading as 2 separate buildings. They do not want this to be one expansive facade. So that was somewhat challenging in that, we thought initially it should be a cohesive structure, but it pushed our design are a challenge to us and allowed us to create really 2 separate buildings within one. So the corner here facing Davis Square, both sides have been treated with masonry, full bed brick on all 4 sides, but we're treating them in 2 different styles. The first being a more traditional, but we're adding a lot of texture and sort of breaking up this facade with some of the detailing we're showing to get some interest here and not just be the typical punch out windows in the facade. On the other end, we're also using masonry, but then implementing some more contemporary shapes and sort of bump outs to give the facade some life and to clearly have this read as 2 different spaces. That being said, we want this to read as a cohesive building to an extent. So we've tried to tie this storefront together, have some similar elements such as some of the tones of the brick and the other trim and panel elements. Another concern that UDC brought up at one point was they weren't ecstatic about the idea of having parking, but they understood it, but they didn't want that to just be sort of this chasm of a garage door along the street. That can somewhat be very unfriendly, both to passersby and just people in general going by. So we tried to treat that as though it was a storefront itself, and that it has the same mullion pattern that the adjacent expanses have, which allow this to read more as a commercial space rather than just a garage door along the street. So here's more of a realistic rendering. Again, we've got these great trees along West Street, which we are intending to maintain. And then we kind of have a nighttime version looking back away from Davis Square down Highland as to how this sort of fits into the aesthetic. I will say there's been a little artistic liberty taken with hiding some of these trees along West Street, but that's really more to show the building off rather than the existing trees. But with that, I will leave it to the board to questions or comments.
Well, thank you very much. I have a comment and a question. My comment is I'm actually really pleased by the way this building looks. I mean, it's been a closed gas station. Tonight's gas station redevelopment night, by the way. We've got another one coming after you. I think in a couple of we've got some on Summer Street that was continued. I really like this building. I think it looks cohesive. I think it looks traditional on one end as you were describing, but I think it looks like a nicer contemporary building on the other side. I think it's nicely broken up. I like the fact that you're using the full, what is it called? The full course, the real brick, as opposed to the building that was presented just before you, which was the fake brick and looks awful. This I think looks great. It's got some depth to the windows. It doesn't just look like a flat facade. I really like the way it presents. My question is, if I remember what you were saying about the storefront look of the garage, is there a reason that the entrance to the garage is on Highland Ave as opposed to the side of the building? I didn't realize there was an actual street. I just thought it was an entrance to the building next door, and the parking lot behind that, because the entrance, if I recall, the building on the other side of the street from you that you can see from this rendering, the entrance to that building is on the side of it too, so people aren't entering and exiting from Highland Ave. Is there a reason that you wanted to put it on Highland Ave and not kind of take people off of the street from turning and stopping? And I know 13 spaces.
No, that's a good question. So West Street is actually a private way, and the owner of that property did not wish for that to happen. There's also a bit of a grade change in the rear. You can't really tell here, but it's almost a 4-foot grade change, which would have made, by the time the ramp got down there, kind of would have frankly not made the garage really worthwhile doing. But it was mostly because of the actual owner adjacent to us.
Okay, I didn't realize it was a private street. Like I said, I didn't think it was an actual street. I just thought it was a driveway.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a fair answer. I guess my other question about the garage is the building is so close to Davis Square. It's literally behind it is an entrance to the bike path. You can throw a rock at the T station. I'm usually the guy that wants to at least put a modicum of parking into some residential buildings, but this one doesn't seem to make sense to have it because you are just so close to Davis Square that there's plenty of and you're probably going to add some on-street parking by getting rid of the curb cut. Why you are adding parking in the bottom when the city is trying to dissuade folks from adding parking when you're so close to a transit hub?
Sure. So, and we've heard that a couple times now. Again, it was the developer's preference to do this, to give some. I don't believe that residents are really going to necessarily have the access to here, because these are more small, single, smaller units, whereas they, it's, well, I don't want to say doubtful that anyone has a car. I never want to say that, but we are providing 2 ride share spaces in that basement. So I think it simply comes down to economics. Frankly, when the economics come back, they may decide they don't want to put that garage in because of the cost of it and the rise in materials. But as of now, this is the preference, just to provide some parking for the owners. Like I said, commercial employees or something like that, maybe delivery. If this was I don't want to say semantics here, but I mean, it could be an edible arrangement. Maybe there are vans down there. I'm not sure. There could be something there that necessitated that, but it's mostly a developer decision.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I'm not going to say no, but usually it's the goal of the administration is, and the planning board is to minimize garage spaces when you're this close, but that's fine. Okay, those are my comments. I would like to open it up to other members of the board who have questions or comments, because I will also open it up to public testimony this evening. So I don't know if folks want to hear the testimony or speak first. Yes, Rob.
Yeah, I have one question before the public testimony, and I appreciate your question on the location of the garage. That was one of mine too. Looking at this image in front of us now, on the, I guess, I don't know which, on the side of West Street that this building is located, currently there's a fence, and then even on this image here, there's sort of this, brick column that I think belongs to the other building there on the other side of West Street. Is that, it's kind of sitting in the sidewalk. Is that going to be removed as part of this project?
So yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ann.
I'm sorry, it's not my understanding it's being removed. I believe it's staying just to keep the, to differentiate from the two buildings, but I'll let Will probably have a little more eloquent answer than I.
I mean, the reason why I ask is it appears on some pages and not others. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, honestly, I believe that's on this building's property, because the property line basically goes right to that edge of the street and the sidewalk. So if I had my druthers, I would remove it. I'm not sure what it does. I don't know if there's signage or some sort of intercom on it. I think that would be a discussion for the developer and the abutter. But I agree with you that it sort of loses the corner elegance of the building by being there. I can't answer that, unfortunately. I'd love to, but I think it should be gone personally, but I can't. I can't make that decision. If I had a sledgehammer, I'd do it, Rob, but I don't.
Thank you.
Thanks. I saw Erin had raised her hand. I don't know if you still have a question that you want to ask now or wait.
I can wait till after public comment.
Okay. Did I see Amelia raise her hand?
Mr. Chair, thank you. If I could ask the presenter to walk us through how loading will be handled for this building, I think that would be helpful in advance of the public comment.
Sure. You get to the site plan. I think actually the civil plan addresses this better than the architectural. Okay. No, maybe not. I will just do it with my plan. So we are designating a loading, I'm sorry, while this is sliding through here. So this area right here, so as was previously mentioned, this is one continuous curb cut. So we're actually adding parking back to the street. But this last, I want to say it's 25 feet right here on this edge is designated as a loading zone as well as the trash pickup. So the intention is, not having parking there will help with visibility and access coming in and out, but it also gives it a clear loading spot for move-ins, trash and deliveries as such.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The shortest, most satisfactory answer to that question that I've ever gotten.
Does anybody else want to have questions for the applicant, or can I open it up to public testimony? Okay. So at this time, I would like to open up this hearing for public testimony for anybody that wants to speak in support of the application. Please raise your hand and I will call on you if I see you. Going once, going twice. Close that portion of the public hearing. and open it up to anybody that wants to speak in opposition or otherwise express concern for the application at 371 Highland Ave, I think. Please raise your hand. Okay. Going once, going twice, seeing none. I will close that portion of the public hearing. I do have a question for Attorney Vigorito. Could you remind me when the last community meeting was on this one? Because I know you guys had been to the DRC a few times in 2021. I think I heard that the last community meeting was in 2020. Is that correct?
I apologize, Mr. Chair. The first one was and I know the architect had talked about there was some community meetings under the old code, but for relative to the new code, the first meeting was March of 2020, March 9th. And then the second one was March 10th of 2021. It's a little crazy, almost a year to the day. Sorry if there was any confusion in that, but you know, it was, and then the first one, it was, you know, live in person, very well received. And even the second one was very well received. You know, it was Zoom, but, you know, we had questions and they were all answered. And, you know, I think everyone left pretty comfortable. I mean, I think that speaks volumes this evening. People aren't speaking against the project.
Right. I mean, I'll just, you know, again, reiterate how much I think this is a welcome project to that site. I mean, I know it very, very well. I think most of us do. So
We're thrilled you like it because it's been a long process.
It has. But, you know, with projects of this scope and size, I do like to leave it open for written testimony, at least for a short period of time, just to make sure that we do encompass all of the public testimony that that we're going to get, if, you know, especially since the last community meeting was, you know, several months ago now. So what I'd like to do is leave the written comment period open until Friday the 12th. Our next meeting is the 18th. And I would be excited to take this project back up again on the 18th with all of the benefit of any written testimony that we might get between now and the 12th.
That sounds great. I team is thrilled to hear that. Oh, I think Ms. Gino has a question.
Did I see? Sorry, Aaron, I had the text box over you.
Yeah, the box of doom.
I keep trying to move it, and I can't find a good place for it.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Quick just comment on the 4 street trees. I very much appreciate getting 4 really nice elms, large street trees here. Just a quick comment, if you had considered diversity in that tree set, especially when you have elms that I know you're getting Dutch elm resistant ones, but maybe like substituting one of them for either a scarlet oak or a hackberry, which are on the Somerville street tree plant lists and are in fact larger street trees that would not, you know, change your green score. The only reason I bring it up is because elms of this variety at mature size have a crown height or crown width, I think 60 feet, and these are planted about 25 feet, if I'm reading the plans correctly, together. So you're going to get this sort of bunching tree effect, and just a consideration. If I had sort of my preference, maybe switching one of them for a different species.
Yeah, I think we'd be happy to work with the city arborist and get a different mixture of trees there, to your point, so that it's not just this hedge down the road.
Yeah, I don't see it as like a showstopper, but just as a sort of a comment as you work with the arborist on the street trees.
Absolutely, appreciate the input.
Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. Did anybody else have any comments before I see Amelia's hand?
Mr. Chair, a really minor point, but I do think there were inconsistencies. I know between the 22 versus 23 units. I understand that was a distinction based on the retail, but a number of documents were unclear and referred to it as 23 dwelling units. In addition, I'm unclear on the total number of long-term versus short-term bike spaces being provided. I think those numbers were also used inconsistently. I think there's a requirement for 22 or 23. There are 15 being provided in the plan set, but someone said 22 during the course of the meeting. If we could, I'm content for it to be something that's a condition to just work with staff, but if we could make sure that those are reconciled, just particularly on the bike parking, want to make sure we're accounting for both the short-term and long-term requirements.
Yes, we can have that reconciled, but for the next meeting for you, if that would please the board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amelia. Does anybody else have any comments before we move to continue this for a few weeks? Seeing none, the chair moves to continue discussion on 371 Highland Ave. November 18th meeting, seconded by Amelia. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Great, we will see you all in a few weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, and the last item on the agenda this evening is a continuation of the discussion on 872 Broadway. We had asked for and have received updated designs from the applicant on this project. We had also made some comments about the size and mass of the balconies that were kind of cantilevered over the sidewalk. So what I would ask the applicant to do, whoever might want to be unmuted should be unmuted, and their screen should be shared. I would like to see if we can where we were a few weeks ago with the rendering that was presented, contrasted with the new proposed designs that were submitted for this meeting, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Ann Vigorito, 424 Broadway. We're here. Phil Seymour is here, and he does have some different options. And among the team, we have discussed these options, and we all like different options. So we're hoping that, which it has led to a great discussion. So we're hoping that, it'll be a good discussion for the board. Did you want to recap, Mr. Chairman, of anything, or just go right to the options?
I wanted to see where we started out from. Because it's a little hazier in my mind, because I did look at the new options too. I just don't remember what the old one was as well. If you have a rendering.
We'll start with the first the original design. Okay, why don't I think Phil's got the first, he's got it up as option 1, and I'll let him go through the slides.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Phil Seymour from Balance Architects. So kind of where we left off last meeting was a little bit of a hodgepodge, because there are kind of two different styles of renderings. We had shown what we had presented to the UDC, which was this option 1. And then our latest renderings showed the requirement that the balconies are, extending 5 feet per the Somerville zoning ordinance. It just came to my attention yesterday that the Somerville zoning ordinance has changed such that these decks would not need to be 5 feet, they could be 3 feet. However, when we had designed this for these latest round of renderings, we still had it be a 5 by 10 balcony extending from the building. So that is kind of where we left off. And then the rendering where we kind of first looked at this, and this was primarily to analyze how those would look. I think the general consensus of the board was there's a lot missing in terms of some of the landscape approaches that we had taken. The existing street tree isn't shown in here. As well as some of the service berries that are on the roof. So, and that was the other slide, looking up Broadway. So, so the first thing we did was to take this original version and actually put it in the context of a photograph from the street. that was taken a couple weeks ago. Made sure that we're including the existing street tree in the front of the building, also showing what those service berries would look like during the summer as well. You know, in the winter they wouldn't have foliage, but you would still see some of those branches. And so just a little bit more detail on this design, as well as looking at that's the same design, looking at it down the street, showing again with more of the kind of realistic context and setback. So some of the comments that we heard were related to just the design and trying, you know, some members thought that it wasn't as contextual as it could be, so we tried to look at that and examine it. One of the comments from the UDC was adding a cornice. So this option is very much similar. It uses those same kind of phenolic resin wood panels, but it carries a cornice across the top that's kind of similar to the building directly abutting it to the right in the view. And you can see that there is kind of some relationship, I think, between that cornice here and some of the kind of color of the masonry building to the left. This was also a fan favorite among many of our peers who we chatted to about this. We also looked at trying to just bring more traditional materials, or more standard materials. So a clapboard siding, similar to what you'd see on the right side, similar to really what's in the neighborhood. It's quite frequent to see a clapboard siding. Looking with the same fenestration options over here. Looking down the street, this also has cornice that carries over. And then we did a final option, which is a black metal base with ACM panels, but with full masonry on the upper floors, with kind of a trim band to really accentuate these bays that are in the front. And then you can see that on the side view as well. And so that has a kind of a corbelled cornice, which is similar to some of the corbelling that you see in the arches to the left. So that's where we're at.
Thank you very much. And can you remind us, I don't know, I'm looking at the balconies now because we, at least I did, I think some of my colleagues did too, have concerns that it was too deep over the street. It was, causing a little bit of a weird overhang for, people walking underneath it. Is this a 3 foot long or a 5 foot long?
This is the 5 by 10.
5 by 10. And do you have renderings where it would be the 3?
The most similar would be something like this, which I think was 2.5. That was the original design. That was then not compliant with zoning, but with the zoning change, 3 feet, I believe it's 3 feet, would be compliant.
Okay. I will restate my preference for this building, just because there are people walking underneath and it would be awkward to walk underneath somebody's balcony like that. I mean, this is a very heavily traveled pedestrian way. I would prefer it to be a 3 foot balcony. I think it's kind of, it looks a little strange with a 5 foot kind of jutting out over the sidewalk like that. If it was one big balcony, that might be one thing, but it looks like it's drawers opening up from a card catalog, and it's just kind of odd. But for the design guidelines that you guys put forward, I want to thank you for listening to some of our concerns. I like some of them quite a bit. I actually like the last one that you presented the most. If I had to pick, I think it's traditional while still being pretty visually interesting. And I think that would do a lot to enhance the way it relates to the one-story building next to it, which is also brick. That would be how I view this particular project. I'd like to hear what my colleagues think. Debbie.
think after a year and a half of, of Zoom, I would remember to unmute myself, but not going to happen. Mr. Chair, I agree with you. I've always found these balconies just like visually distressing. There's there's something about it, and I think maybe the 3 feet, overhang would really make a big difference in that regard. And to be honest with you, I remember reading the application that the target tenant for this building are tough students. And no offense to college students, but the idea of a larger balcony and 6 of them with a bunch of college students in this building, I mean, to me, it didn't seem very necessarily desirable, particularly if you're showing some sort of cafe underneath where there may be other people sitting.
Three-story beer bong. I mean,
But just my own personal view, I actually like the white clapboards. To me, it moderates the visually for me the balconies in some way that the brick does not. But thank you again. I could see a lot of work went into these, offering these various designs. So much appreciated.
Thanks, David. Rob?
Well, I won't make this any easier. I too like the idea of balconies that I don't know what the exact dimension is, but does not protrude out into the public way. And if that's 3 feet, that makes sense to me. Personally, I thought scheme 2 was the strongest of them. I think it added the cornice line that the UDC had asked for. And I honestly, I'm sort of open to some of these, newer materials. And, I think we've seen this in other neighborhoods where some more contemporary and modern elements and materials are mixed in amongst the old. So I don't have I thought scheme 2 was the best, followed by, I guess, scheme 1, which is just sort of the same thing without the band at the top. And then I guess I would rank scheme 3 and followed by scheme 4. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Anybody else want to? So we've got a little bit of a difference in opinion on which scheme we prefer. We're going to have to vote on one of them. I'm actually happy with all of the schemes. My preference is just that. I think they're all attractive buildings. And I can't recall which one that was, but I liked that one too. That was probably my second choice. So I'd be happy to vote for this one with the 3 foot. I think we're all on the same page that the 3 foot balcony is the appropriate way to go. As for the scheme itself, I mean, like I said, I found all of them to be appealing, and I think we can we go through the list one more time just because now I've seen them a few times. I don't know which one was 1, 2, and 3.
2, I might be able to do yeah, you can get a lot on here. Is this still clear? Does that kind of help? So scheme 1 does not have the cornice, so it all kind of appears similar materiality. Scheme 2 is also the phenolic resin wood panels, but it has the cornice that relates to the adjacent building. Scheme 3 really is like a sharp contrast in material, so it's got the white clapboards. And then the last scheme is a masonry scheme with these kind of vertical bands at the base with a black base.
I think I was the only one that liked scheme 4, so I'm happy to go with one of the others that the board prefers. I like them all. I know Debbie, you had said you enjoyed the white, which is number 3. So if I had my choice between kind of the remaining, I like 2 and 3. But let's see where you all wind up.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
if I may, I'll throw in maybe a vote for scheme 2. I like the wood paneling and the biophilic. The white and black for me, I don't know, jokingly amongst friends, we call this Stormtrooper modern. Depending on how it turns out, like the white clapboards are really nice on a Victorian. You put it next to black metal and it's like, it depends.
Okay. I see John's hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to put in a vote for scheme 2 as well. I do like the cornice and I like the masonry cornice mix. Although I think all the renderings were very well done.
Amelia, have we gotten your opinion?
Mr. Chair, my internet blipped for a moment and I missed some of the discussion after the presenter pulled up the multi-page view up at first. How are we proceeding in a determination of which scheme to vote on?
I'm just kind of polling the planning board, seeing what we like. So
Okay.
far, it looks like we might have a critical mass on scheme number 2.
I would offer that I think scheme 1 is the least desirable and feel equally positive about the other schemes. I think the cornice line is a really important, I think the strong and dimensional cornice line is an improvement that is necessary because the protrusions on the roof are so far back that, you know, I appreciate that it's something we discussed at the last meeting, and I think these renderings all show a very fulsome summer scene, but I would like us to picture them without that foliage, and I think that makes the importance of a architecturally dimensional cornice significant. I would also just offer for my colleague the difference between a 3-foot balcony and a 5-foot balcony. I think that typically it's said that humans have an instinct for sort of where things would work, where a cantilever will naturally fall, right? Like what is too far. And I think that everyone finds it a little bit visually jarring to see the 5-foot projection because it looks unbalanced in a way that the 3-foot projection is just mentally less sort of distressing, as people have pointed out. So certainly agree with the 3-foot balcony recommendation.
Thank you. Could I ask for a, before we take a vote, a blow up of scheme 2 one more time, just so we can see what it is that I think we're gonna go with for you? Yeah, that's very nice. Okay. Is the planning board ready to vote on 872? Okay. The planning board has discussed 872 Broadway. We have made recommendations and conditions that the balconies be 3 feet instead of 5. We have made a condition that we would vote to approve scheme number 2. So this requires a site plan approval, and I believe we are ready to vote on it. So with the required considerations and findings having been discussed and reviewed, with the proposed conditions that we have discussed and that were already in existence for a potential vote on this project, it is the motion of the chair to approve with conditions this application for site plan approval for 872 Broadway, seconded by Amelia. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
John votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Great. Thank you all. Congratulations to the applicant. Looking forward to seeing the finished product when you're done.
Thank you. We appreciate all the help from the board as well.
And we appreciate you listening to us. You guys work very, very well with us, and that's always good for everybody.
We're very happy. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night. I don't believe there's any other business before the planning board, unless anybody wants to raise anything for the good of the meeting. No? Okay, seeing none, the next meeting of the planning board is November 18th. So we will see you all then. Chair moves to adjourn, seconded by Amelia. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
John votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Great. Thank you all very much. See you in a few weeks.
No one's hungry.
Take care.
I don't think we've got a vote from the pup. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks.
Raisa, you can close out the meeting.
Okay.